Chapter 141. Every human being had a weakness. And Lu Chu had a fatal weakness, which was that he was greedy and lecherous. Watching over prisoners was a lucrative job, so he often took advantage of his position to accept bribes. If that was all, Chu Qingyan would have a hard time dealing with him. But this man was so greedy that a few prisoners on death row had bought their lives with 10,000 taels of silver. On the day of the execution, Lu Chu had secretly replaced the prisoner. After all, most of the time, the head of the prisoner had to be covered during the execution, so no one knew if the person being beheaded was the real person. Furthermore, no one had expected that Lu Chu would dare to deceive his superiors and his subordinates, deceive everyone, and secretly carry out his dirty tricks. So when Chu Qingyan found out about this, she felt that God was on her side. So what if Lu Chu was a member of the Fu family? She had something on him, so he would not dare to make things difficult for her. So Chu Qingyan led her men to the prison cell, but they were stopped halfway. Chu Qingyan looked at Lu Chu with a smile. "What is the meaning of this, Lord Lu?" "According to the rules of the prison, you can only bring one person with you," Lord Lu explained while wiping his sweat. He did not know why, but when he saw the little princess smiling at him, he felt goosebumps all over his body. Chu Qingyan nodded. "The rules cannot be broken. I understand." So she turned around and looked at the people she had brought with her. Without hesitation, she tapped on Ethereal. Ethereal was a doctor, so he would be useful to her. If something happened to Big Ice Cube in the rain, he would be able to take a look at him. So the two of them slowly walked into the depths of the prison cell, led by the officers. After Chu Qingyan and the others disappeared into the light, Lu Chu clenched his fists and spat. He had caught eagles for many years, but he did not expect that one day he would be pecked in the eye by an eagle, and such a young one at that. The secret he had kept for so many years had been discovered. He was flustered and angry, but there was nothing he could do. He did not know how to explain it to Consort Yu. Consort Yu had promised him a prosperous future, but the King of England's consort had his lifeline in her hands. Between money and life, of course his life was more important. The people waiting at the stairs bowed deeply to Chu Qingyan. "Prison head Zhang, thank you for your trouble." This was the person Turan and the others had mentioned. He was the one who had received the Big Ice Cube's favor. "Consort King of England is too polite. Please come this way." Prison head Zhang bowed and led the way. Chu Qingyan nodded and walked forward with Ethereal. The 9th floor of the heavenly prison didn't go up one floor at a time. Instead, it went down one floor at a time. It has no light, it is darkness. The further down they went, the quieter it became. Other than the sound of footsteps echoing in this enclosed space, there was only the sound of water dripping. This prison was eerie, terrifying, and cold. Chu Qingyan tightly grasped the handkerchief. Looking at this dark and eerie place, her heart inexplicably tightened. Is this where the Big Ice Cube is? It was hard to imagine. It was said that the most terrifying places in the world were none other than these three: the casino, the backyard, and the prison cell. Ethereal saw her slightly changed expression and couldn't help but say, "Actually, this place is nothing. This one and the Lord have been at the border for so many years. The battlefield is the real cruel place. The Lord has suffered so much. This is nothing to him." She knew that Ethereal was comforting her, but when she heard his explanation, her heart felt even more uncomfortable. She could only reply casually. Until prison head Zhang said, "We're here." Only then did she raise her head abruptly. At the end of the corridor was a solitary cell. Cold and dark iron pillars blocked the way. Inside that cell was the person she had been thinking about day and night. A black figure sat on the ground, looking up at the wall. His posture was casual, as if he wasn't in a dark prison cell, but sitting in a pavilion, lazily resting. Chu Qingyan quietly looked at him, thousands of thoughts surging in her heart. "Big Ice Cube, you're actually not strong at all. Look, you're wearing such thin clothes, your figure looks very thin." Big Ice Cube, you're actually not living well at all. Your father is biased and heartless, your mother is strict and indifferent. You've never enjoyed any love since you were young. Big Ice Cube, you're actually not cold-blooded and cruel at all. You're the loneliest person I've ever met who never showed it on his face. As if sensing someone's gaze, Xiaosu slowly turned his head. When he met that pair of eyes flickering with pitiful tears, his heart suddenly trembled. Those sorrowful eyes didn't carry pity, but pity. This was the first time, other than Imperial Grandfather and Master, he saw someone look at him like that. You're here, Qing Yan. This was the first time he spoke since he entered the prison. The corners of his mouth lifted slightly. Although the mask covered his face, that moment of youth made her absent-minded. It was like he had crossed something and arrived in front of her. When she came back to her senses, she had already charged into the prison cell and fiercely hugged him. She wanted to burst into tears and ask him why he didn't go back home. She wanted to forcefully hit him, punishing him for making her worried and afraid these past few days. But she couldn't. She couldn't cry right now and couldn't blame the Big Ice Cube because the Big Ice Cube would feel worse than her. She didn't want to force this feeling on the Big Ice Cube because he was already tired enough. Xiaosu tightened his arms and pulled the person in his embrace into his embrace. These past few days, his heart had been too cold and he somewhat missed her warmth. He thought that she would cry her eyes out, but it was a pity that when she left his embrace, he saw her angry expression. Big Ice Cube, you really are too stupid. If you let me go into the palace with you, you wouldn't be here alone right now. At least you still have me. Xiaosu was a bit surprised before he revealed a smile. He rubbed her head and raised his brows as he said with a smile, in the Sichuan country's prison, men and women are separated. This king doesn't want to hear your ghostly wails in the middle of the night. Chu Qingyan rolled her eyes at him. Then she took the food box from Ethereal's hands and opened it. She took out the dishes one by one and placed them on the table. Then she handed him a clean pair of chopsticks and a spoon. Although you're in a single room with a bed and a table, the conditions aren't bad, but the food won't be as good as the palace's. Hurry up and eat. Otherwise, it'll be a waste of the good intentions I brought. Xiaosu saw her urging expression and his heart was slightly moved. This was a special time. For her to be able to enter the prison, it must have taken a lot of effort. Xiaosu did not refuse and took the chopsticks. Although he had just eaten lunch, he didn't want to refuse her good intentions. Ethereal looked at the two who were getting along so well and rubbed his eyes in disbelief. How did the young Princess Consort who looked like she was about to cry become a spoiled and unruly young girl in the blink of an eye? While he was lost in thought, the young Princess Consort called out to him, Ethereal, after His Highness finishes eating, help him take a look and see if he's caught a cold. Yes. While Ethereal was taking his pulse, Xiaosu asked, is everything all right in the palace? Chu Qingyan nodded vigorously, I'm here, don't worry. Even if it wasn't good, it must be good right now. She didn't want the Big Ice Cube to worry about the palace at this time. Big Ice Cube, do you have any thoughts about this matter? Chapter 142. After Chu Qingyan asked this, she looked at him nervously, afraid that he would say no. Xiaosu lowered his brows and muttered to himself for a moment, the first is to find the mastermind, the second is for fourth imperial brother to wake up and testify for this king. She had thought about the 2 points that Big Ice Cube said before. Water Spirit and Huoling had never stopped looking for that assassin, but it was a pity that the person who set this trap was too cunning and they couldn't find any clues at all. Xiao Ran's palace was currently being protected by layers of imperial guards and was completely surrounded. They only knew that he was out of danger, but they couldn't find any news about him right now. And more importantly, they didn't know if Xiao Ran could wake up before his trial. These two methods were probably very difficult to accomplish. Ethereal took back his hand and said to the two, there is nothing wrong with Lord's body. Chu Qingyan finally relaxed. Xiaosu pulled down his sleeve. He knew his own body best and he only accepted the pulse to reassure her. Are there any other methods? She continued to ask. For the current situation, there are only these two methods. Xiao Su's voice was indifferent, as if he wasn't talking about his own matters and he wasn't worried at all. Chu Qingyan suddenly felt incomparably sad. She reached out to grab his sleeve and said, "But Big Ice Cube, I don't want you to be wronged, I don't want you to take the blame. I don't want you to be blamed. I don't want anything to happen to you." Xiao Su's heart seemed to be blown by a gentle breeze. It was a bit warm and soothed the coldness from the past few days. He leaned against the iron bars and calmly looked at the person in front of him. "Don't worry, I'll be fine. Even if I'm convicted, nothing will happen. At most, his power would be taken away. At most, he would lose the right to compete for the position of crown prince. At most, he would be chased out of the capital. At most, that would be it." He had already made preparations and was waiting for this day to come. He just didn't think that it would come so quickly, that his imperial father would be so impatient, and that an accident would happen in his life. He lowered his head and looked at the girl who was worried about him. He thought, if Maozuan hadn't saved him, if he hadn't heard her love for her parents under the window of the Chu Manor, if he hadn't approached her with a pure and warm smile, then would his life not have this accident? He wouldn't be distracted and want to protect her. He wouldn't punish his subordinates for not protecting her well, and he wouldn't feel pity for her because he saw her suffer in training. But if it weren't for this accident, he wouldn't have any worries in his heart. There would be no one who could cure him of his loneliness. This was the first time he had someone he wanted to protect. Chu Qingyan did not know why Big Ice Cube would say that, but Kong Ling, who was standing at the side, understood the hidden meaning behind the prince's words. He couldn't help but turn his back and look up at the top of the prison, trying hard to suppress the emotions in his heart. He knew that Lord would be summoned back to the capital this year, and he had expected it. Otherwise, Lord wouldn't have arranged everything when he left the border. And when he returned to the capital, his trusted subordinates wouldn't only bring them. It turned out that Lord had already seen through it. He clenched his fists, and his heart burned with anger. He really felt that his lord wasn't worth it. "Big Ice Cube, don't worry, I will definitely think of a way to save you. If it doesn't work in the end, I will break the prison with Turan and the others." Chu Qingyan raised her fist and said firmly. Hearing this, Xiao Su smiled and shook his head. He was amused by the little girl's plan. Seeing this, Chu Qingyan immediately looked at him with dissatisfaction. "I'm serious, we have to plan for every situation, okay?" And, her expression suddenly changed into yearning, roaming the world from now on, watching the rosy clouds side by side, riding a horse to share the prosperity of the world. This kind of feeling is really good, just like when Erkang and Yongqi rescued Little Swallow and Ziwei from the celestial prison. Treading thousands of waters and traveling to the ends of the world, this kind of feeling is also very good. Suddenly, her head was pressed down, and her thoughts were interrupted. Chu Qingyan rubbed her head and looked at the ice cube who was withdrawing his hand. She couldn't help but resist. "Big Ice Cube, can you not spoil the fun like this? What I said is all true." Xiao Su shook his head. "That's not wandering the world, but being chased to the ends of the world." Chu Qingyan was silent when she heard this. It was indeed possible. Xiao Su's gaze fell on her, and his eyes became deep. "If things get out of hand, let Huling and the others arrange for you to leave. You were originally a chess piece that Imperial Father placed by my side to weaken my power. Once the game is set, you have no use. Imperial Father will not make things difficult for you." But when he said this, the little fellow's expression changed. "Big Ice Cube, don't always think of a way out for others but always put yourself in a hopeless situation, okay? I will arrange my own path, I don't need you to interfere." "I hate you." Chu Qingyan stood up, her face full of anger. She flung her sleeves and left. Ethereal looked at her lord and then looked at the young princess consort who was quickly leaving. She didn't know what to say. "If it comes to a point where there is no other choice, send her away and ensure her safety," Xiao Su said indifferently. His gaze was on the ground, and he didn't look in the direction she left. Lord, Ethereal wanted to speak, but was stopped by Lord's cold gaze. Do as Ben Wang says, Xiao Su said firmly. Yes. Ethereal gritted her teeth and then turned to leave. Chu Qingyan, who ran out of the prison, actually regretted it. She shouldn't have lost her temper at the big ice cube. This was a precious opportunity to meet him, but she actually ruined it. She stomped her feet and was angry at herself. But who told the big ice cube to say so many infuriating words? Consort King of England. Lu Chu hadn't left yet and was waiting at the door. Chu Qingyan collected her emotions and looked at Ethereal, who had followed her before walking towards him. Lord Lu, my lord is in prison. I hope that you can help me look after him. For example, the quilt and the hot tea. I won't go into the details. Lu Chu, who had been caught red-handed, was angry but didn't dare to say anything. He could only nod and bow in agreement. As for those things, as long as you treat my lord well and don't let him be wronged, this princess promises to keep it a secret. But, Chu Qingyan leaned close to his ear and snorted, you know the consequences. After Chu Qingyan left, Lu Chu wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and subconsciously shook his body. He could not tell that this little princess consort was quite cunning. But he couldn't not do as she said. What a trap. After getting on the carriage, Huo Ling, who was acting as the driver, asked, Little Princess Consort, are we preparing to return to the Fu? No, I want to enter the palace, she said in a low voice. Although Huo Ling was a bit surprised, he still turned the carriage around and headed towards the imperial palace. Chu Qingyan had just left when a person appeared in front of Xiao Su's cell. Xiao Su turned and saw the person, but he didn't look surprised at all. Chapter 143. Xiao Su was not at all surprised to see this person in the celestial prison. It was his grandfather. He was a brave and fearless elder who had entered and exited the borders 3 times with the Sichuan emperor and recovered the territory that had been invaded 100 years ago. He had once again expanded the territory of the Sichuan kingdom. He was also the current left prime minister of the Sichuan kingdom. Liang Qingyu. Grandfather, how have you been these past few days? Xiao Su stood up and calmly saluted him. Liang Qingyu saw that although he was in the celestial prison, he still had an indifferent attitude and saluted him with some relief. He had been in the military all his life and had a strong personality. He could not tolerate people who cried endlessly and had no opinions of their own. Fortunately, his grandson was not like his mother, who was short-sighted and unwilling to be outdone. But sometimes, he didn't like his grandson's personality. He looked sharp, but in reality, he was the one who was most unwilling to fight and scheme against others. But his wisdom, his courage, and insight were things that others didn't have. You have suffered. Liang Qingyu sighed softly. Grandfather, don't say that. It's quite good here. It's quiet and no one disturbs me. This is not considered crying. Xiao Su calmly replied. He really did not feel that there was any suffering here. No matter how difficult it was, he had already lived through it. Everything else was nothing to him. Liang Qingyu sighed again. The prince who should have been favored by the heavens, the legitimate son of the first heir, and the prince who should have enjoyed the admiration of tens of thousands of people, was now wronged and imprisoned in the celestial prison. Even his appearance had been burned beyond recognition in the fire 10 years ago. In his eyes, this child was plagued with misfortune. He used to be so cute and intelligent, but now he was so cold and distant. No one could see what he was thinking with those ink-black eyes. A few years ago, the emperor had sent him out to the borders to gain experience. In reality, it was to give the 4th prince time to grow and help the 4th prince consolidate his position. Su knew all this, but he quietly left. He also managed the borders in an orderly manner and repelled countless invasions from neighboring countries. Unfortunately, no matter how much he did, the emperor did not take it seriously. If he could not find a solution to this matter, then he would not be able to turn the situation around. The Liang family's position was tied to his. If something happened to him, not only Empress Liang, but even the Liang family would be in danger. For the Liang family, he would not allow this to happen. Regarding this matter, grandfather has already sent people to talk to the Supreme Court officials in charge of handling the case. Your mother will also plead with your father. Liang Xiang wanted to pat him on the shoulder, but when he raised his hand halfway, he remembered that he didn't like human contact, so he awkwardly withdrew his hand. I've troubled Grandpa. Xiao Su looked at his aged grandfather. Although his body was still strong, there were gray strands of hair at his temples. Xiao Su sighed. Time waited for no man. He had grown up, but his grandfather was already old. His heart softened. Although his grandfather had always prioritized the Liang family, he still had some sincerity for this grandson of his. As a veteran on the battlefield and a veteran in politics, he immediately sensed the closeness in his grandson's tone. He immediately struck while the iron was hot and said, Su, if your imperial father still believes that you did this, what will you do? Xiao Su replied lightly, let nature take its course. Although he knew his grandson well and had already guessed, he was still disappointed. Liang Xiang sighed softly. Your mother is right. You have a cold personality and are unwilling to fight for power with others. Sometimes, this kind of personality is not bad, but it is not suitable at this time. Xiao Su silently looked at the person in front of him. He knew that he had more to say. Su, don't forget that you are not alone. There are many people behind you. Your mother, the Liang family, and the officials who support you. How can you say that you will let nature take its course? Once nature takes its course, your status as the first successor will be taken away. Can't you see that His Majesty's thoughts are all on the fourth prince? Liang Xiang said with some disappointment. Since he was young, his mother had always exhorted him. His future was related to the Liang family, so he had to do this and that. The moment his grandfather appeared, he had already guessed his purpose. However, he was still willing to give him a trace of hope. He had come to the prison because he was worried about him. Unfortunately, he sometimes felt quite disappointed because these people had never cherished his expectations. Xiao Su frowned. It is a fact that imperial father favors fourth imperial brother. This prince cannot change it. Ever since fourth imperial brother was born, imperial father's thoughts were very clear. In the past, he did not understand, but now he saw through it. But so what? With you here, the fourth prince's title is not legitimate. Because of your existence, His Majesty does not dare to casually make him the heir apparent. Liang Xiang's tone was a little agitated, as if he did not agree with his somewhat negative attitude. However, he did not understand that Xiao Su was not negative. He just did not want to live a life of open strife and secret struggle. Liang Xiang took a breath and continued, however, you do not need to worry. Even if His Majesty insists on punishing you this time, we have a plan to cut off all means of retreat. At this point, what good plan does grandfather have? Xiao Su frowned. Liang Xiang glanced at him, then walked to the table and raised his hand to order some tea. Then, he wrote a word on the wooden table. Reverse. When Xiao Su saw the word clearly, his eyes narrowed and his expression became serious. Grandfather, no. Liang Xiang wiped away the word and said angrily, why not? You have endured for so many years. Do you still want to be suppressed like this? Xiao Su's eyes flashed when his grandfather mercilessly exposed the truth of so many years. However, he knew that his grandfather wanted to provoke his anger so that he would agree to his plan. Xiao Su's tone was still strict. Once this happens, there will be rivers of blood. The implications will be widespread. The title will not be legitimate and the people will be uneasy. External enemies will be waiting for an opportunity to enter. There will be internal and external troubles. Sichuan will be plunged into disaster. In the past few years, Sichuan had been weak. The south was flooded, the north was dry, and there was no harvest. The people had no way to make a living. The neighboring countries were watching covetously and were looking for an opportunity to invade Sichuan. How could he provide this opportunity for external enemies? Liang Xiang looked at his grandson in shock. It was not that he had not thought about these problems, but he did not think that he would be so resolute in his opposition. But wealth comes from danger. Without destruction, there can be no construction. Have you really thought this through? He tried to persuade him again. Su, I don't want to be a sinner for all eternity. Xiao Su turned his back and replied indifferently. Liang Xiang sighed softly. If your imperial father had put in the effort to understand you, he would not have repeatedly pushed you out of the door. You have the talent to be a general and minister. You have the appearance of a ruler, but it was buried. The unfinished words were buried in the cold and gloomy prison. Xiao Su curved his lips in self-mockery. In reality, he wished that he did not have the identity of a prince. Chapter 144. Liang Xiangjian couldn't persuade him, so he sighed softly. Before he left, he said that he would think of a way to help him safely survive this crisis. If he accepted the plan, he would send someone to contact him at any time. After Xiao Su thanked him, he turned and left. When there was only one person left in the cell, he couldn't help but wonder how the little guy he had angered was doing. Chu Qingyan, who Xiao Su was worried about, had already arrived at the palace gates. She reported her identity and successfully entered the palace. Then, she didn't dare to delay for a moment as she headed towards Chaoyang Palace. Right now, the only thing she could think of was to find Empress Liang. Big Ice Cube was her son. She wouldn't leave him alone. However, there had been no news from the palace recently. She was a bit uneasy and felt that she had to personally go there to be at ease. When she arrived at Chaoyang Palace, Luo Yun and the others had already received the news and were waiting outside the hall. Greetings to ninth young Miss Chu. Luo Yun gave a perfunctory curtsy. This wasn't the time to argue about whether they were respectful or not. Chu Qingyan hurriedly asked, "Is Her Highness the Empress inside?" When Her Highness heard that ninth young miss was coming, she had already gotten up and is waiting inside, Luo Yun replied. And, then quickly bring me in. Chu Qingyan didn't want to waste a moment and urged her. Although Luo Yun wasn't very willing to listen to her orders, Her Highness had told her to bring her in, so she turned and led the way. The luxurious and magnificent inner hall was not much different from the magnificence of the main door. Perhaps it was even more exquisite and luxurious. As expected of the residence of the head of the Eastern Palace. Chu Qingyan had stopped outside the palace the previous 2 times and had never entered the palace. This time, however, it was truly an eye-opener. It was a pity that Chu Qingyan was not in the mood to admire the palace at all. Her footsteps were hurried, and she wanted to see Empress Liang as soon as possible. The moment she entered the inner hall, Chu Qingyan saw Empress Liang, who was wearing a gold-embroidered dress, sitting on the main seat. Her eyes were looking out the window as if she was deep in thought. She did not notice that Chu Qingyan had entered. Luo Yun stepped forward and said, "Nyang Nyang, you're here." Empress Liang turned her head when she heard this, her eyes gloomy as she looked at the people in the hall. Chu Qingyan had already knelt down in salute. "Qingyan greets Your Highness the Empress." "Long live Your Highness the Empress." Chu Qingyan bowed very respectfully. After all, she had a request to make, so she had to show a proper attitude. Empress Liang didn't let her get up. She picked up the teacup beside her and asked in an unfriendly tone, "Why are you looking for this empress?" Chu Qingyan didn't care about her attitude at this time. She raised her head and said sincerely, "Reporting to Your Majesty, Qingyan came to the palace this time to ask you to save His Highness. Su, is this empress's son. This empress will naturally save him. Is there a need for you to ask for help?" Empress Liang looked at her with displeasure. Chu Qingyan felt like the weight of 1,000 gold, pressuring her to the point that she couldn't breathe. However, Chu Qingyan still straightened her back. Her gaze was sincere and worried as she said, "Your Highness the Empress, you've misunderstood. It's just that His Highness has already been locked up in prison for almost 2 days. Qing Yan is a bit worried, so she gathered her courage to enter the palace to see you. When Empress Liang heard this, the teacup in her hand slammed onto the table. Luo Yun hurriedly handed over a handkerchief. Empress Liang pushed her hand away and looked angrily at the person kneeling in the hall. Are you questioning this empress's ability? Do you think this empress doesn't have the heart to save Su, or? Chu Qingyan, what status are you using to speak to this empress? Empress Liang was already annoyed by her father's words today. Now, Chu Qingyan's words made her recall how her father had said that she didn't fulfill her duties as a wife and as the empress. She couldn't help but fly into a rage out of humiliation. Her actions, when was it up to a little girl to criticize? Chu Qingyan didn't know where Empress Liang's anger was coming from, but she could come to a conclusion. This Empress Liang was unpredictable. It was no wonder that Ice Cube was always so talkative when interacting with her. She bowed, Your Highness the Empress, please calm down. Qingyan didn't mean that. At this time, Luo Yun also spoke up, Master, I don't think she has the guts to slander you. Don't get angry. Your health is more important. Chu Qingyan pursed her lips and didn't say anything else. Empress Liang took a deep breath, then leaned back in her chair. She looked coldly at Chu Qingyan. Chu Qingyan, do you want to save Su-er? Chu Qingyan didn't know what she was thinking at this time, but she still nodded, yes. Then come with this empress to plead with His Majesty. Empress Liang crossed her arms on her knees, her tone serious. As you command. Chu Qingyan immediately responded. She was going to plead with His Majesty, but just as she was about to leave, she heard a palace servant report that Chu Qingyan had entered the palace to seek an audience. She thought that bringing more people along might increase their chances of success. Moreover, Chu Qingyan was the King of England's consort personally bestowed by His Majesty the Emperor Emeritus. Even if His Majesty didn't give her face, he would still be willing to see her. Empress Liang stood up and looked down at her condescendingly. Her tone was cold, Chu Qingyan, your status is too lowly. If you were born in a good family, perhaps you would still be able to speak in front of His Majesty. Perhaps His Majesty would also consider your maternal family and not treat Su-er this way. However, there are no ifs. Your status can't be changed. A phoenix is a phoenix, and a sparrow is a sparrow. Your existence is actually Su-er's weakness. Bringing you along to see His Majesty this time was just a convenience. Later, don't say anything wrong. Otherwise, this empress won't let you off. After saying this, Empress Liang turned to instruct the palace servants to change their clothes. She no longer looked at Chu Qingyan, who was kneeling there. Chu Qingyan pursed her lips. Her eyes were filled with unreconciled anger. Her background was innate. Moreover, she came from the 21st century. Subconsciously, her understanding was deeply ingrained. There was no distinction between high and low. Seeing the Empress belittling her in such a lofty manner, it was impossible to say that she wasn't angry. However, all of her anger was well hidden. This wasn't the time to fall out with the Empress. Big Ice Cube was still in prison. The most important thing was to rescue him. Compared to Big Ice Cube being alone in prison, it was nothing for her to suffer some grievances. After Empress Liang bathed and changed her clothes, Chu Qingyan obediently followed the procession to the imperial study without any obstructions. Eunuch Chow, is His Majesty inside? When they arrived at the imperial study, Empress Liang asked Eunuch Chow, who was guarding the door. Eunuch Chow replied with a radiant smile, His Majesty just returned from Mingchen Hall. Right now, he's inside reviewing memorials. The words Mingchen Hall pierced Empress Liang's heart like needles. His Majesty was accompanying that mother and son every day. It really was too infuriating. After living in the inner palace for so many years, Empress Liang was already familiar with how to hide her emotions. She smiled and said, Then Eunuch Chow, help this Empress pass on a message. Hearing this, Eunuch Chow said with a bit of difficulty, His Majesty has ordered that he won't see anyone. Empress Liang's expression changed slightly. Chapter 145. Luo Yun said worriedly, "Your Highness, this..." Empress Liang raised her hand to stop Luo Yun from continuing. She looked at the tightly shut palace doors with a forbearing expression. Chu Qingyan was also a bit surprised. Sichuan Emperor had just come over from the mother and son's place, but now he refused to see Empress Liang. This treatment was a bit different. She had heard some rumors before that the current Sichuan Emperor wasn't the first in line to succeed the throne. He had an older brother above him. However, because the Sichuan Emperor often led troops into battle when he was a prince, his political ambitions surpassed those of his older brothers. Moreover, the Sichuan Emperor married the daughter of the heroic Prime Minister Liang. He had a deep foundation and powerful relatives, so he was able to squeeze out his older brothers and successfully become the emperor. It could be said that the Liang family had contributed greatly to the Sichuan Emperor's ascension back then. As for Consort Yu, it was said that she and the Sichuan Emperor were childhood sweethearts and grew up together. Prime Minister Fu wasn't the Prime Minister back then. He was only a grand tutor who taught the Sichuan Emperor. However, Prime Minister Fu was very smart. He had his daughter become the Sichuan Emperor's study companion at a very early age. A talented man and a beautiful woman, so it wasn't difficult for them to fall in love with each other. However, for the sake of the throne, the Sichuan Emperor had to choose between his love and power. Therefore, the Sichuan Emperor married Liang Yuan and promised Prime Minister Liang that he would marry her with the position of the head of the imperial harem. That was how he received Prime Minister Liang's strong support and became the crown prince. As for the Sichuan Emperor, who had betrayed the beauty, after ascending the throne, he immediately married Consort Yu into the palace. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but snort coldly. So Empress Liang was only a springboard for the Sichuan Emperor, while Consort Yu was his true love? Should I say that Sichuan Emperor is sentimental or heartless? However, he was heartless towards the Ice Cube's actions. Chu Qingyan was a little angry, but here, everyone was wearing a mask. She didn't show her emotions on her face, so she forced herself to wear a smiling mask. Empress Liang instructed Luo Yun. Luo Yun asked someone to take out something similar to a pillow and put it on the ground. Eunuch Chao was a little puzzled. "Your Majesty, what are you doing?" "Eunuch Chao, tell His Majesty that I will kneel here. When he wants to see me, I will get up." With that, Empress Liang knelt down on the pillow and straightened her back, looking determined. Eunuch Chao was shocked by the Empress's actions. This. He couldn't even speak properly. Chu Qingyan immediately knelt down. Since Empress Liang was kneeling, how could she, as her future daughter-in-law, just stand there and watch? Empress Liang's expression softened slightly when she heard a soft sound from behind her. It seemed that this little girl wasn't as unreasonable as she thought. Eunuch Chao exclaimed when he saw the two kneeling on the ground. He hurriedly went into the hall to report. "Your Majesty, Her Majesty the Empress and the Chu clan's 9th young miss are kneeling outside the hall and asking for an audience," reported Eunuch Chao. When Sichuan Emperor heard this, his fingers paused in the middle of flipping through memorials. He then continued to flip through them. "We won't see them." "Yes." Eunuch Chao responded in a low voice and left the hall. When Empress Liang saw the expression on Eunuch Chao's face, she already knew the answer. Her fingers twisted the handkerchief as her heart turned cold. She suddenly felt that her father's scolding of her was right. She should have taken charge of the situation at the first moment and not watched from the sidelines, causing to fall into this predicament. But there was no turning back now. She continued to kneel, hoping that His Majesty would see her on account of her kneeling for a long time and be lenient. Chu Qingyan was slightly surprised. If this Sichuan Emperor was so cold to the master of the harem, then wouldn't this big ice cube be even more? Her eyes were filled with worry. Time slowly passed. Her knees went from stabbing pain to numbness, and then to unbearable pain. She didn't dare to check. She was worried that someone would see it and pass it to Sichuan Emperor's ears, saying that her kneeling wasn't sincere at all. She couldn't help but think of the big ice cube kneeling in the cold night on a full moon. Did her knees hurt a lot? Did her calves feel so numb that they no longer belonged to her? Was her back so sore that she couldn't bear it? She had only knelt for 2 hours, and it was already like this. Then what about the big ice cube who had knelt for an entire night? Was it even more uncomfortable? Her eyes were sore. She closed her eyes, feeling extremely distressed. In fact, wasn't the big ice cube's heart more uncomfortable? Being punished by his own father without distinguishing right from wrong, that was the most heart-piercing pain. In order to distract herself from the pain in her knees, Chu Qingyan tried to think of other things. For example, what was the big ice cube doing right now? Were father and mother doing well in the Chu family? Would the Chu family make things difficult for father and mother for this assassination? Did Water Spirit and Turin find a breakthrough in this case? She could think of many, many things. It seemed that because of this, time really passed very quickly. 2 hours passed, 4 hours passed, the door to the hall was still tightly shut. Everyone was in despair. At this time, Eunuch Chao opened the door and walked out. Empress Liang looked at him questioningly. Eunuch Chao sighed slightly. Esteemed Empress, please return. His Majesty said that no matter how long you kneel here, he won't see you. Empress Liang's expression stiffened slightly, but she quickly covered it up with a faint smile. It seems that His Majesty is truly very busy. Then I'll have to trouble Eunuch Chao to pass on a message for this consort. State affairs are important, His Majesty also needs to take care of his own body. As she spoke, she had Luo Yun help her up. In the process, she even stumbled slightly. Chu Qingyan sighed slightly in her heart. This was the concubine by the emperor's side. Even if she suffered, was wronged, or was reprimanded, she still had to welcome it with a smile. Because no matter what the Son of Heaven did, it was a gift. Empress Liang's expression was slightly tired as she looked at Chu Qingyan, who was still kneeling. You should also return. Don't do useless work. Chu Qingyan shook her head. Esteemed Empress, you should return first. Qingyan will continue to kneel for a while. Empress Liang was both physically and mentally exhausted. She couldn't care too much and had Luo Yun help her back to Chaoyang Palace. Chu Qingyan lowered her head slightly. Her knees had already been scraped, and there was a piercing pain. Her white dress, which was stuck to her knees, had already bloomed with plum blossoms. On her snow-white dress, it was a bright red color, but it was also an eye-piercing red. But Chu Qingyan couldn't care about anything else. Even though her head was dizzy and her eyes were dizzy, she still didn't want to give up. She didn't have a superior family background, unparalleled martial arts, or abilities that people feared or could use. But she just wanted to do her best to do something for the big ice cube. Even if His Majesty didn't want to see her, he still had to leave the hall, eat, and rest. So she wasn't afraid that he wouldn't come out. As long as he came out, she would ask how he could bear to wrong his son. The sun was setting in the west. The sky was filled with multicolored light, dyeing the world orange. Chu Qingyan looked at the faint yellow color on the ground, indifferent. At this time, Eunuch Chao walked in front of her and bowed. Ninth young Miss Chu, His Majesty summons you. Chapter 146. Chu Qingyan thought she had misheard. She raised her head in disbelief to look at the smiling Eunuch Chao. Did His Majesty summon me? Her tone was uncertain. Eunuch Chao nodded. He looked at Chu Qingyan, whose lips were white and forehead covered in sweat. He said with some pity, Miss, quickly get up. Don't kneel, the floor is cold. Chu Qingyan immediately nodded. Her hands pushed against the ground as she slowly stood up. The blood had already dried up, but the hem of her skirt was stuck to her wound. When she stood up, it tore and hurt. Her legs were weak and she couldn't stand steadily. She almost knelt down again. Eunuch Chow hurriedly called for 2 palace maids to support her. After she steadied herself, Chu Qingyan waved her hand and had the palace maids leave. She then turned to Eunuch Chow and said, "Let's go in first. We can't keep His Majesty waiting." Eunuch Chow was slightly surprised. The young girl in front of him was not delicate and was willing to endure hardships. He couldn't help but have a new level of respect for her. Chu Qingyan did not delay. She endured the pain in her leg and walked into the imperial study. A silver incense burner with gilded bamboo joints as tall as a person leaned against the corner, emitting spirals of incense. The 4-sheep square was placed on the table, the Changxin Palace lantern hung high, and the finely polished jade horn cup was still placed on the corner of the table. Everything was the same as when she first entered the imperial study. However, at that time, her heart had been nervous. Now, it was completely different. Sichuan Emperor sat high behind the table covered in bright yellow embroidery. When she came in, he did not even raise an eyebrow. Chu Qingyan knelt down with difficulty. "Greetings to your Majesty." "Long live your Majesty." "Stand up." Sichuan Emperor put away the document in his hand and looked at her. "Thank you, your Majesty." Chu Qingyan slowly stood up. After this set of movements, the back of her clothes was wet. However, she gritted her teeth and endured the pain from her leg. "What do you have to say to me?" The Sichuan Emperor's face was gloomy. It was impossible to tell if he was happy, angry, or sad. Chu Qingyan raised her head and looked directly at Sichuan Emperor. She said seriously, "Your Majesty, His Highness was wrongly accused. He was with Qingyan at that time, so he couldn't have assassinated the 4th prince. Qingyan can testify for His Highness." Sichuan Emperor glanced at her. "Sometimes, you don't even need to do it personally. Your alibi doesn't count." Hearing the Sichuan Emperor's tone, it was obvious that he was certain that it was Ice Cube who did it. She couldn't help but feel a little angry, but she still said calmly, "Your Majesty, based on your understanding of your son, do you think he is the kind of person who doesn't care about brotherhood? If that's the case, the 4th prince would have been in danger if His Highness hadn't stepped in to save him when he was attacked on the streets. Do you still think His Highness would harm his own brother?" Sichuan Emperor's eyes flashed. It's hard to distinguish between people's hearts. Imperial power and politics aren't as simple as you think. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but want to sneer. "Your Majesty, actually, you don't trust His Highness, your son, right? That's why you prejudiced him and sentenced him to death, right?" Sichuan Emperor looked slightly angry. "Chu Qingyan, are you doubting me? Do you know what the consequences of doubting me are?" Chu Qingyan had already decided to throw caution to the wind. She wasn't afraid of his might at all. "Your Majesty, how can eggs remain intact when the nest is overturned? If His Highness is convicted, how can Qingyan, as his fiancé, remain unharmed? So, Your Majesty, Qingyan isn't doubting you. She just wants to seek justice for His Highness. I couldn't tell that you were so eloquent and daring." Sichuan Emperor looked at her coldly. Chu Qingyan laughed self-deprecatingly. "Your Majesty, it's not that Qingyan wants to disobey you. It's just that His Highness is truly innocent." "Let's hear it." Sichuan Emperor snorted coldly. Chu Qingyan curtsied and straightened her back. "Your Majesty, do you think someone would be so stupid as to summon the 4th prince in front of so many people and then have someone assassinate him to leave evidence behind? Normal people wouldn't use such a method to frame themselves for injustice. Don't you know that some people do it because they know that such a reason doesn't make sense? That way, it's easier to get rid of suspicion." Sichuan Emperor retorted coldly. Chu Qingyan looked at the person on the throne with bright eyes and said slowly, "Your Majesty, but if that person knew that you didn't believe them at all, would they still take such a risk? How dare you?" Sichuan Emperor was furious and rebuked coldly. Eunuch Chow hurriedly stepped forward and patted Sichuan Emperor's back. "Your Majesty, please calm down. Chu Qingyan knelt down and fearlessly met Sichuan Emperor's fiery eyes. She said word by word, "Your Majesty, it's not that Qingyan wants to provoke you on purpose. It's just that Qingyan has a few words in her heart that she needs to say." Eunuch Chao saw that she still wanted to say something, so he couldn't help but worry for her. "Don't think that we can't touch you just because you're the granddaughter-in-law personally bestowed by the Emperor Emeritus," Sichuan Emperor said angrily. Perhaps it was because no one had dared to talk back to him like this in many years, but he felt that his dignity had been challenged and was burning with rage. Since she had already angered Sichuan Emperor, it didn't matter if she said a few more words. Thus, Chu Qingyan straightened her back and pursed her pale lips. With a straight face, she said unyieldingly, "Your Majesty, His Highness is a righteous person. He treats people gently, is intelligent, and has a pure personality. For many years, he has been guarding the borders and maintaining the peace of the country. He has never complained. He does not speak much, but he has always done what he should for the country and the people. You have never praised him or encouraged him, but he has always been so respectful to you. Even when he was falsely accused of assassinating his brother, he only cared about his younger brother's safety. He was never given any expectations, but he never disappointed. Your Majesty, why can't you see that you have such an outstanding son?" Chu Qingyan had just said this when she was interrupted by the person above her. "Chu Qingyan, are you accusing us of not being a good father, so you're teaching us how to raise a son?" His voice was gloomy as he spoke through gritted teeth. It was as if Chu Qingyan nodded, what awaited her would be her head falling to the ground. Chu Qingyan silently nodded in her heart. Such a cold-blooded and heartless person who couldn't distinguish right from wrong was truly not a good father. However, a wise man submits to circumstances. She didn't want to die before she could save the ice cube. "Your Majesty, Qingyan didn't mean it that way." Chu Qingyan placed her hands on the ground and bowed respectfully. Sichuan Emperor suppressed his anger. If it weren't for the Emperor Emeritus, he would have already ordered people to drag her out. "Get out. We don't want to see you again." Eunuch Chao immediately came to support Chu Qingyan when he heard this. He said softly, "Miss, don't make His Majesty angry again. Let's go." Chu Qingyan took advantage of the situation and stood up, but she didn't plan to let it go. She had knelt for an entire afternoon and still hadn't said enough. As soon as Eunuch Chao saw her bright eyes looking at His Majesty, he knew that this little girl was going to say something that would shock the heavens and make the earth weep. "Your Majesty, Qingyan only has one last thing to say." Sichuan Emperor, who originally didn't want to pay attention to Chu Qingyan, looked over when he heard this. His rising and falling chest clearly indicated his current anger. Both the palm and the back of the hand are flesh and blood. "I hope Your Majesty will reconsider." Chu Qingyan looked at the stunned Sichuan Emperor and bowed before turning to leave the hall. Crash, Chu Qingyan didn't know what had been smashed behind her. She curled her lips. She had cursed all the things she had wanted to say, and her heart was at ease. She had spoken the truth. It was impossible for Sichuan Emperor to punish her for her crimes. It would be good if he sent her to prison. It would fulfill her wish of being locked up with the ice cube. However, she knew that it was impossible to rely on these words to wake Sichuan Emperor up. She had to find another way out. Chapter 147. Your Majesty, please calm down. Don't lower yourself to Miss Chu's level. Eunuch Chao served a new cup of tea and carefully served it. The debris on the ground had already been cleaned up. Sichuan Emperor angrily took the tea. After taking a sip, he exhaled faintly. "Chao Ji, do you also think that Jin did something wrong?" Eunuch Chao immediately knelt down in fright. "Your Majesty, why would this servant think so? Your Majesty is wise, how could you do something wrong?" Sichuan Emperor sighed and waved his hand to let him get up. He always had people around him who flattered him and tried to figure out his thoughts. No one was willing to tell him the truth. That little girl was right about one thing. Both the palm and the back of the hand were his flesh. But he had to give up some things. He always had to give up some things. Eunuch Chow looked at His Majesty's frown and thought about the little girl who dared to talk back to His Majesty. He couldn't help but admire her. It was rare to see someone who dared to speak to His Majesty like this. Even the ministers rarely disobeyed him and spoke so bluntly. He didn't know if it was because a newborn calf wasn't afraid of a tiger or because one couldn't judge a book by its cover. He thought that if His Royal Highness was able to get out of this one day, then his little princess consort's future would be limitless. Chu Qingyan walked out of the imperial study. Beside her was the little eunuch who had led her here. Chu Qingyan asked the little eunuch to bring her to Mingchen Hall. Although the little eunuch didn't know why she wanted to go to Mingchen Hall, he was still a master. He couldn't refuse and brought her there. Chu Qingyan looked at the sky. The sun was about to set. She had to quickly finish these things before the palace doors were locked. Her legs were still numb, but she couldn't care less. She had a feeling that there wasn't much time left. The trial would begin in 3 days. Even Water Spirit and Hualing couldn't find the truth, let alone the Supreme Court officials. In order to report, they would have to comply with Sichuan Emperor's wishes and testify that Big Ice was the mastermind. Therefore, she had to fight for Big Ice's innocence before then. What she wanted was Xiao Ran. She felt that Xiao Ran would definitely be a breakthrough. Once she arrived at Mingchen Hall, Chu Qingyan was stopped. Chu Qingyan looked at the 2 burly grannies in front of her and smiled. I am Qingyan from the Chu clan. I am here to visit the 4th prince. I wonder if the 2 of you could help me pass on the message. One of the nannies sneered. Our imperial concubine said that no matter who comes, no one is allowed to approach our 4th prince. So, miss, please go back. So it was Consort Yu's orders. Chu Qingyan blinked and smiled. Your 4th prince and I are close friends. If he knows that I'm here to see him, he will definitely be very happy. So, I hope that the 2 of you can make things convenient. Otherwise, if your 4th prince finds out, I'm afraid that he will punish the 2 of you. The 2 nannies looked at each other. Although her imperial concubine had told them to stop people from entering, this person said that she was a good friend of the 4th prince. If the 4th prince were to blame them, then they would lose their positions. Seeing the 2 of them waver, Chu Qingyan wanted to continue speaking. However, she heard a voice that was full of praise but full of derision. What a sharp tongue. 9th young Miss Chu, a day apart feels like 3 years. You really make people have a whole new level of respect for you. Qingyan greets Consort Yu's mother. Your imperial concubine is too kind. Chu Qingyan curtsied in the direction of the person who had just arrived. The person who had just arrived was Consort Yu. The 2 nannies also hurriedly curtsied. One of the nannies complained, Your imperial concubine, this servant tried to persuade this young miss to leave, but she insisted on staying. This servant tried my best. Consort Yu's cold gaze swept across the 2 nannies. The 2 of them couldn't help but shiver. Finally, Consort Yu's gaze landed on Chu Qingyan. She said with a faint smile, 9th young Miss Chu, I heard that you angered His Majesty quite a bit in the imperial study. Is that true? Chu Qingyan's eyes twitched. It had only been half an hour since the incident in the imperial study, but she didn't expect Consort Yu to already know about it. As expected, there were no secrets in the imperial palace. Chu Qingyan had no intention of offending His Majesty, replied Chu Qingyan with her head lowered. It doesn't matter if you did it intentionally or not. This concubine will give you a piece of advice. If you don't have the ability, then don't even think about taking up the responsibility. Otherwise, if you fall one day, don't say that this concubine didn't warn you. Imperial concubine Yu looked at Chu Qingyan, who was standing at the bottom of the stairs, with a hint of mockery in her voice. Back then, she did not punish Chu Qingyan, but now that she saw Chu Qingyan running around for Xiao Su, she felt incomparably happy. Chu Qingyan replied calmly, Many thanks for your imperial concubine Consort Yu's advice. Qing Yan will definitely remember it. Consort Yu smiled coldly. She turned to leave, but Qing Yan called out to her. Your imperial concubine, could you allow Qing Yan to see the fourth prince? Asked Qing Yan. Consort Yu turned to look at her coldly. You're not an imperial physician, so why would this concubine allow you to see Ranner? Also, you're the family member of the suspect who tried to assassinate my Ranner. Why would this concubine risk letting you see Ranner? Qing Yan calmed herself down. Your imperial concubine Consort Yu, it's impossible for His Highness to assassinate the fourth prince. The two of them have such deep feelings for each other that it's impossible for them to draw their swords against each other. You also know that the mastermind behind the scenes isn't His Highness, so why are you letting the real culprit go unpunished? Ruthlessness flashed through Consort Yu's eyes. Of course she knew that Xiao Su wasn't the culprit. She also knew that the mastermind behind the scenes was someone else. However, she had long wanted to consign Xiao Su to eternal damnation. Thus, this was an opportunity to get rid of the obstacle to Ranner's throne. How could she let it go so easily? This concubine also doesn't know what the truth is. I'll leave everything to the justice of the Supreme Court. This concubine believes that His Majesty will give this concubine and Ranner an explanation. You should stop wasting your time and think of a way to escape. Consort Yu smiled coldly at Qing Yan. She then ordered the palace servants, fourth prince is still unconscious. What are you all standing around for? Hurry and send them away. If they disturb fourth prince's recovery, this concubine will hold you responsible. Yes, yes, yes. The two mama immediately walked up to Qing Yan and said unhappily, let's go, 9th Miss Chu. Qing Yan watched as Consort Yu walked away. She had a plan in her mind. It seemed like fourth prince wasn't awake yet, so there was no need for her to stay here. It was better for her to return to the palace and discuss her plan with everyone. Thus, Qing Yan raised her head and looked coldly at the two grannies who were chattering non-stop. When the two grannies met her gaze, they were instantly stunned. That aura of power and authority made them lose the ability to speak. By the time they regained their senses, Qing Yan had already walked far away. They couldn't help but wonder if those were the eyes of a 10-year-old child. Too terrifying. When Qing Yan walked out the palace gates, Huo Ling and the others who had been waiting for a long time came forward to greet her. However, they found that her footsteps were a bit strange and she was limping. Although everyone was surprised, they knew that this wasn't a good time to ask questions, so they silently sent her to the carriage. It was at this time that a voice sounded out, 9th Miss Chu, can we talk in private? Chapter 148. As soon as the voice fell, Huo Ling and the others immediately became alert. They all approached the carriage and looked at the person who had come. This voice was a bit familiar. Qing Yan knit her brows and then she seemed to have thought of something. She lifted the curtain and looked towards the source of the voice. She said with a faint smile, so it's Miss Yao. Long time no see, are you well? The person who came was Yao Ruo. At this moment, she was also seated in the carriage. A servant girl lifted the curtains for her, revealing her pretty face. She saw that His Highness King Ying's personal guards were surrounding Qing Yan and had their hands on her waist. It was as if they would attack her if she showed any disrespect. Yao Ruo's heart was filled with envy and jealousy once again. What ability did Qing Yan have to receive this kind of treatment? She thought about it. If she replaced Qing Yan, then these people would be protecting her. Therefore, Yao Ruo was even more determined in her plan. She said to Qing Yan with a smile, thanks for 9th Miss Chu's concern. Everything is fine. I wonder if 9th Miss Chu is free right now. Ruo would like to invite 9th Miss Chu for a cup of tea. Qing Yan wanted to refuse, but then she thought about it. The imperial palace was not on the same path as the Yao Manor. This person appearing here, it probably wasn't as simple as inviting her for a cup of tea. Then I'll have to thank Miss Yao. Please lead the way. Chu Qingyan agreed with a smile. Yao Yingrua saw her agree so easily and felt proud. She had the driver turn the carriage around and head forward. Little Princess Consort, aren't you worried that this person has some ulterior motives? Hualing asked with a bit of worry. Ethereal and the others had already returned to the manor in front of the heavenly prison. Right now, only Xining and Hualing were by her side. It's fine, I'll go meet her. Chu Qingyan was not worried that this person would play any tricks. Beside her was the most powerful cavalry under Big Ice Cube's command, Shaolai Cavalry. Seeing the young princess' insistence, Hualing nodded. In just a few days, the young princess' actions had made them look at her in a new light. Now, she had become their backbone. Although she was a bit immature, she could barely support the overall situation. So, Hualing turned the carriage around and followed. When they arrived at a tea house, the carriage stopped. Yao Yingrua got off and said to Chu Qingyan, "This is the place." Chu Qingyan nodded. She held Xining's hand and followed her slowly. Yao Yingrua noticed her legs and curled her lips. She turned around and walked up the stairs. Xining was about to remind her master that her leg was injured and she couldn't go upstairs, but she was stopped by her master. Chu Qingyan shook her head. "It's nothing." Most of the people downstairs were single customers, and there was no independent space. If this person wanted to talk to him in private, she wouldn't do it in such a noisy place. He hoped that Yao Yingrua wouldn't disappoint him. Otherwise, he would have wasted his effort in enduring the pain in his leg to go upstairs. The group entered a private room. Yao Yingrua asked, "What kind of tea does 9th Miss Chu want to drink?" "As you wish, the guest will follow the host's wishes." Chu Qingyan sat down and smiled faintly. Even though it's already autumn, the weather is still a bit dry. Why don't we order some flower tea to relieve the heat? Yao Yingrua turned around and said to the waiter, "Give me a pot of chrysanthemum tea and 2 plates of pastries." "Okay." The waiter agreed and left. This tea house served the tea very quickly. Even the pastries were prepared. Chu Qingyan looked at the rising steam in front of her and smiled faintly. "What business does Miss Yao have with Qingyan? When we first met on the street that day, Yingrua felt that 9th Miss Chu was a clever and obedient little sister. I've always wanted to find a chance to get to know 9th Miss Chu." Yao Yingrua said to Chu Qingyan with a smile. Chu Qingyan smiled faintly and said, "You're too polite. Then let's talk about some intimate things. Can you?" Yao Yingrua looked at Hualing and Xining behind her and hesitated to speak. Chu Qingyan knew what she meant and had Hualing and Xining leave. Hualing said worriedly, "Little Princess Fei, this subordinate will be outside. Call this subordinate if you need anything." Chu Qingyan nodded and the two left. Yao Yingrua said sarcastically, "The subordinates of the King of England are really loyal to Mimi. Yingrua is envious." Chu Qingyan felt that the word Mimi sounded a bit strange. Were people from ancient times all so familiar with each other? Also, she felt that Yao Yingrua's words were a bit strange ever since she entered this tea house. It was a bit grating. Chu Qingyan avoided her words. She didn't want to tangle with her and said directly, "Miss Yao, what business do you have with me? Why don't you say it?" Yao Yingrua was a bit surprised that Chu Qingyan went straight to the point. It seemed that this person wasn't stupid even though she was young. She knew that she had business with her, so she slowly poured tea for the two of them and slowly said, "His Highness the 4th Prince was assassinated and His Royal Highness was imprisoned. The court is panicking and rumors are spreading in the capital. Mimi must be very worried. Has the King of England's Fu thought of a countermeasure to save His Royal Highness?" Chu Qingyan understood a bit. Last time on the street, she had struck up a conversation with the Big Ice Cube. She must have admired the Big Ice Cube. She said faintly, "Miss Yao, my Highness has been wronged. His Majesty will definitely clear my Highness' name." When Yao Yingrua heard her say, "My Highness," her heart felt like it had been stabbed. She said with a fake smile, Mimi should know that this matter won't be resolved so easily, right? Chu Qingyan frowned. What do you mean? It's no secret that His Royal Highness is not favored. Will the person in that position let go of this opportunity? Yao Yingrua didn't mention who that person was, but Chu Qingyan's heart sank because she had just met him today. Yao Yingrua saw her pale face and smiled proudly. But His Royal Highness can be cleared of suspicion. This sentence successfully attracted Chu Qingyan's attention. She raised her head and looked at her. I'd like to hear the details. My grandfather is the current grand tutor. There are countless students under him. As long as they jointly write a petition, His Majesty will be afraid. After all, talents are a scarce resource in the Sichuan. Therefore, His Majesty won't risk the world to convict His Royal Highness. Yao Yingrua looked at her fingernails and said unhurriedly. Chu Qingyan raised her eyebrows. What's your condition? When a weasel pays a New Year's greetings to a chicken, it always has bad intentions. She didn't believe that Yao Yingrua would be willing to help for free. Yao Yingrua raised her head and saw the clear look in her eyes. She suddenly felt that it was a little dazzling. Why did the curve of her lips have the shadow of His Royal Highness? Mimi, you're really smart. Of course, you'll succeed in everything you do. If you have something to say, just say it. Chu Qingyan interrupted her boasting and looked at her coldly. Yao Yingrua sneered. Since you've made it clear, then I'll say it directly. I can ask my grandfather to save His Royal Highness, but the condition is that you have to leave His Royal Highness. Chapter 149. What? Chu Qingyan looked at her in disbelief. Is Miss Yao joking? I can say anything, but I don't know how to joke. Younger sister, do you want to consider it? If His Royal Highness is convicted, then as the future Princess Consort, it will be difficult for you to escape. Why don't you agree to my conditions? You're not suited for this official life anyway, so why don't you get rid of it as soon as possible? I'll send you away safely and even prepare the money you need. I'll guarantee that you won't have to worry for the rest of your life. Chu Qingyan sneered in her heart. She really treated her like a child. As the granddaughter of a grand tutor, how much wealth could she have? Moreover, if she agreed to her plan, what awaited her wouldn't be freedom, but a path of no return. Could it be that Miss Yao is suited for it? She retorted. Younger sister doesn't need to worry about whether I'm suited for it or not. Yao Yingrua picked up the teacup and took a sip. She smiled back at her. Chu Qingyan tapped her fingers on the table and calmly said, Miss Yao, I appreciate your good intentions, but I'm afraid I can't agree. If His Highness knows that I'm using this kind of price to exchange for him, he'll probably be angry. I don't want him to be angry. Even if I'm convicted in the end, I'm willing to accompany him. Yao Yingrua didn't expect this answer. She wasn't willing to give up and continued, aren't you afraid of death? Death? Who isn't afraid? But it depends on who I'm with. If it was with the big ice cube, she wasn't afraid. Chu Qingyan stood up and smiled, Miss Yao, you should call Qingyan by her name when you see her in the future. Qingyan can't accept being called younger sister. Yao Yingrua was stunned. Chu Qingyan stopped before she left and turned around to look at her, but there's one thing I think you do have a good point. Everyone outside thinks that His Highness is ugly and frightening and doesn't want to get close to him, but you have a special liking for him. It can be seen that you have good taste. Chu Qingyan raised her teacup. The tea is not bad. Thank you for your hospitality. Yao Yingrua watched her leave with a gloomy face. Of course, she had good taste. 7 years ago, when the King of England led the army to repel the enemy and return to protect the country, she saw him riding on a warhorse and was already fascinated. No, it was even earlier than 8 years ago. She was still a child who didn't know anything. She went to the temple with her family but got separated. She hid under a tree and cried. She met him by chance and he casually asked the guards to bring her back. She would never forget that when he turned around, his silver mask had accidentally fallen off. She had hurriedly picked it up and handed it to him, only to see that peerless face. She had thought that she would never see such a handsome young man again in her life. He took the mask. The personal guard asked if he wanted to silence the witness. He hesitated and said, "Forget it." That was why she was able to survive until now. In the end, under the warning of his personal guard, she left with him in a daze. After that, she never had such close contact with him again. How lucky she was to have met him back then. Her heart had been lost just like that. The King of England was not as bad as the rumors said. He was a peerless handsome man. He was knowledgeable and resourceful. She would be happy to be with such a man for the rest of her life. He fulfilled all of her expectations of a partner when she was young. So she had always been looking for an opportunity to get close to him, wanting to ask him if he still remembered that little girl from back then. But year after year, he spent very little time in the capital. If he wasn't training outside, he was leading troops on an expedition. When he returned this year, an imperial edict bestowing a marriage had been passed down, killing all of her hopes. Today, she did not hesitate to threaten Chu Qingyan and ask her to leave. She was not sure if she had the chance to sit in that position, but she believed that with the attitude of the people in the capital who avoided the King of England, she had a 90% chance of winning. In addition, her grandfather was the imperial tutor and her father was the teacher of the fourth prince. She was not afraid that she would not have a chance. That was a piece of unpolished jade. She did not expect that Chu Qingyan would get it. She also did not expect that Chu Qingyan would reject her like this. Yao Yingrua gritted her teeth. "Chu Qingyan, there will be a day when I defeat you." Chu Qingyan left the room. Hua Ling's expression was a bit strange, but she was not feeling well right now, so she did not ask any questions. The group hurried back to the palace. Just as she stepped into the main courtyard, she was met with a bear hug from her father. "Kai, father really wants to stick a spring onion." Chu Qingyan's eyes became hot. "Father, don't worry, I will save the spring onion." Father Chu cried a few times and Mother Chu on the side noticed that something was wrong with her daughter. She immediately pulled Father Chu away and asked worriedly, Kai, what's wrong with your leg? Why can't you walk properly?" Chu Qingyan laughed softly and comforted her worried mother, "It's fine, it's just a bit bruised. I'll just apply some medicine later. Ethereal's medicine is very good. Last time I accidentally cut my hand and sprinkled some medicine on it, but it didn't even leave a scar." Mother Chu was still a bit worried and supported her daughter into the courtyard. Father Chu looked at his daughter who was limping and thought about Blockhead and Black Impermanence who were at their wits' end this afternoon. He had a plan in his heart and disappeared like a wisp of smoke. Mother Chu pulled up her daughter's trousers and saw the bloody wound. Mother Chu could not hold back and her eyes turned red. Chu Qingyan sighed softly. If she had known earlier, she would not have let her mother help her apply medicine. However, her mother did not ask much. She took the medicine from Xining's hand and carefully applied it for her. Seeing that her mother did not dare to use too much force, Chu Qingyan was filled with emotion. "Mother, I feel that I'm very blessed. It's so good to have father and mother's love." Mother Chu's melancholy disappeared with her words. She shook her head and said with a smile, "Which parent in the world doesn't love their children?" Chu Qingyan was a bit sad when she heard this. Yes, the big ice cube was a child that her parents did not love. However, she only dared to say this in her heart. She did not dare to say it out loud for fear of bringing disaster to her parents. After treating the wound, Chu Qingyan looked at the sky. It was already night. She let her parents stay the night and instructed the servants to inform the Chu estate. Suddenly not seeing her father, Chu Qingyan could not help but get out of bed and go out of the room to look for him. She found her father squatting in a corner with his back facing her. She could not help but walk up to him. However, she heard a strange grinding sound. "Father, what are you doing?" Seeing that it was his daughter, Father Chu raised his hand and proudly showed off the large knife he had stolen from Blockhead. "I'm sharpening the knife." Sharpening the knife for what? Chu Qingyan could not squat down anymore. She leaned against the wall and asked curiously. I'm sharpening the knife until it's smooth and sharp. Then we can go to the imperial prison and rescue the inverted onion. Father Chu lowered his head and continued to sharpen the stone. Father wants to break the prison. Chu Qingyan was a bit amused, but she was also a bit moved. Father, aren't you afraid? I just want to rescue the inverted onion. It doesn't matter if I'm afraid or not. Chapter 150. Inside Mingchen Hall, Xiaoran slowly woke up and was pleasantly surprised by the people in the room. Consort, you sent someone to invite an imperial physician. After treatment, the imperial physician said that as long as he recuperated well, he would be able to get out of bed in a few days. Consort Yu was overjoyed and rewarded the imperial physician. She ordered someone to prepare a tonic soup. Mingchen Hall was immediately thrown into confusion, but everyone was happy. However, Xiaoran was not happy. When he woke up, he took advantage of his mother's absence to ask Xiang Yu about what had happened in the past few days. Xiang Yu told him everything about His Royal Highness. Xiaoran could no longer sit still. At this time, Consort Yu came in. Seeing that he was about to get out of bed, she immediately stopped him. Your injuries haven't healed yet. Why are you in such a hurry to get out of bed? Mother, eldest brother is innocent. I want to explain to Imperial Father that it was someone else who tried to assassinate I. Xiaoran struggled to get out of bed, but unexpectedly heard his mother's cold order. Someone come, close the doors to the hall. Don't let the fourth prince take a single step out. Mother, what are you doing? Xiaoran was stunned. He only heard his mother say in a voice that only he could hear, silly child, this is a rare opportunity. If you don't get rid of the King of England, with your abilities, it will be too difficult for you to compete with him. Xiaoran stared dumbfoundedly at his mother, who was usually gentle, but now had an expression that he couldn't see clearly. Mother, this son has never thought of competing with eldest imperial brother. It's not important whether you want to or not. There will come a day when someone will force you to go on stage even if you don't want to. Consort Yu looked into his eyes and said with a serious expression. But, Xiaoran could not accept it. Be good. Don't you like that little girl from the Chu family? Imperial concubine mother promises that once this matter is over, I will take her to be your concubine or concubine, as long as you are happy. Imperial concubine Moon gently stroked his head as she spoke in a gentle voice. Xiaoran was a little tempted when he heard this, but he quickly overturned this idea. Taking advantage of someone in a perilous situation was against the morals of a person. He shook his head and said firmly, the saints said that there are things that a gentleman should do, and things that he should not do. Imperial mother, please let I go see Imperial father. No, put away your saintly words. Mother will not agree to this. If you dare to take a single step out of Mingchen Hall, everyone here will be beheaded. After speaking, Consort Yu ordered the guards to increase the security, then left angrily. Xiaoran clutched the wound on his chest as he lay on the bed and stared blankly at the ceiling. Why did everything become like this? His eldest brother was his closest brother. How could he sit by and do nothing? How did Imperial concubine mother become like this? How was he going to face Qing Yan in the future? Xiaoran's face was filled with despair. When Chu Qingyan, who was leaning against the wall, heard her father's words, her heart was moved. A prison break. It wasn't that she hadn't thought of it before. Moreover, she had said in front of Big Ice Cube that if all their methods were useless, then she would bring people to break the prison. Seeing the figure hanging down beside her, Chu Qingyan did not even turn her head as she asked, the worst plan is to break the prison. What are the chances of success? 80%. Hualing jumped down from the wall and replied without asking anything. Add another 10%. Turin walked out and followed up, unless there's a 10% chance. Chu Qingyan suddenly felt a bit proud, a bit gratified, a bit emotional, a bit regretful, and a bit moved. He was proud that Big Ice Cube had such elites under his command. He was gratified that Big Ice Cube had fierce cavalry by his side all these years. He was moved that he was able to meet them, but regretted that Big Ice Cube was not able to use him. He was moved by the deep friendship between them. Unless it's the last moment, we definitely won't use this method. Once they broke the prison, Big Ice Cube's reputation would be ruined and he would have to admit that she was the mastermind behind the scenes. It would also determine his life as a fugitive. She would not allow Big Ice Cube to live the rest of his life like this. Turin and Hualing nodded. They had thought of this method before, but they were more worried about their master's attitude. Hearing the little princess say this, the two of them let out a sigh of relief. Chu Qingyan leaned against the wall in thought. She thought of what Yaoingrua said today and a spark suddenly flashed in her mind. She clapped her hands and thought of an idea. That's right, is there anyone that His Majesty respects, or someone that His Majesty would listen to, or someone that he would give some face to? Today, she had begged Empress Liang, begged Sichuan Emperor, begged Consort Yu, but she had received nothing in the end. It was better to rely on herself than on others. She would find a method herself and save Big Ice Cube herself. Although she still had to ask for help in the end, she still had a high chance of winning. Hualing and Turin were stunned when they heard this. Someone that His Majesty respected. Someone that His Majesty would listen to. Someone that His Majesty would give some face to. Wasn't that the retired emperor? Little princess, the retired emperor, if it's the retired emperor, he will definitely save master. Hualing was a little excited. They had truly become muddle-headed, how could they forget such an important savior like the retired emperor? Turin nodded in agreement. Chu Qingyan's eyes lit up. That was the retired emperor that pointed her out to Big Ice Cube. Alright, Turin, continue to investigate the whereabouts of that assassin. Hualing, inform Water Spirit that she must find traces of the retired emperor. The two sides will work together and try to make progress in 3 days. Although she had not eaten for a day, it did not affect her excitement. If the news of Big Ice Cube being imprisoned was spread, then the retired emperor would definitely come back if he heard about it. She hoped that the retired emperor would really pity Big Ice Cube. The Earth Spirit and the Fire Spirit immediately accepted the order and left. Their footsteps also became much lighter. Although the retired emperor's whereabouts were uncertain and Master had not heard any news about him, if they used all the manpower and resources of the valiant cavalry and dug 3 feet into the ground, they did not believe that they would not be able to find him. At this time, Father Chu, who had skipped away, came back. At the same time, he brought back a message from Mother Chu, telling her to go back to the courtyard to eat. Chu Qingyan also had a bit of appetite at this time. She was about to leave with her father when she saw someone rushing over. Little princess, there is an old beggar outside. He is hanging around the door and won't leave, saying that our king's palace owes him a meal. Normally, this kind of beggar was not uncommon, but this was the first time he had seen such a righteous person. If this was a normal time, he would just give him a meal, but this person was asking for a yard after getting an inch. He said that he wanted to have dinner with the king's palace's master, otherwise he would not eat. This person must have come to find trouble, but recently, something had happened in the palace. The guards did not dare to blatantly chase him away, fearing that they would give him a reason. However, it was not good to have someone hanging around the door, so housekeeper Bai immediately sent him to ask the little princess. Chu Qingyan did not think that there would be such a strange thing. She was thinking about how to deal with it, but she saw her father excitedly running out of the palace, saying that he wanted to see this old beggar. Chu Qingyan held her forehead and could only support her body to slowly walk over. Then she would also go and see this person. Chapter 151. The moment Chu Qingyan stepped out of the door, she saw her father squatting at the side. In front of him sat a white-haired old man dressed in rags. His face was covered in mud, and so were his clothes. They were all over the place, and it was impossible to tell the original state of his clothes. White Tiger stood at the side. When he saw the young Princess Consort come out, he respectfully said, "Young Princess Consort, this is the old beggar who refused to leave." Chu Qingyan nodded, "You can go and attend to your own matters first." White Tiger acknowledged and left. When she had entered the Fu, this White Tiger had made things difficult for her. But in the past few days, perhaps he had seen that the situation had changed, so he was even more respectful towards her. She could not find a single mistake in the way he did things. Presumably, he was also afraid that she would take the opportunity to make things difficult for him. Chu Qingyan rolled her eyes. She did not have so much free time to take revenge on others. Chu Qingyan walked in front of the two people who were staring at each other. She did not look at the old man anymore, but asked, "Old grandpa, is there anything that you need that the King of England's Fu can help you with?" Perhaps this person was here to find trouble, but an old man should take care of other people's elders. Chu Qingyan had always been respectful towards the elderly. That old man had already seen Chu Qingyan come out. He sized her up from the corner of his eyes. She was steady and virtuous, with a pretty appearance. He was quite satisfied in his heart. Seeing her attitude towards the steward, he was even more satisfied. It seemed that she could already make decisions in the King of England's Fu. This old man knows fortune-telling. His voice was loud and clear, full of energy. Chu Qingyan blushed with shame. Could it be that another quack had come? "We don't need fortune-telling." The old man did not seem to hear her reply and continued, "Your Fu is in big trouble and needs the help of an important person." Chu Qingyan instantly narrowed her eyes. The person she had asked Turin and Hualing to find was someone who could save the big ice cube. She could not help but ask, "Who is the important person that the old man is referring to?" The old man stroked his tangled beard, then stood up. He was a few heads taller than Chu Qingyan. Even if he lost, he did not lose. Chu Qingyan took a few steps back, trying not to look up at him. Seeing her small movements, the old man did not care. He stretched his hands and waved at her casually. "This old man wants to bathe, eat, and rest." "Okay." Chu Qingyan did not hesitate. Shi Ning was shocked by her master's forthright attitude. The old man gave Chu Qingyan a look that said, "At least you know how to behave," then casually walked into the Fu. Chu Qingyan instructed Shi Ning to order people to prepare. Chu Qingyan watched the old man leisurely walk into the Fu with his hands behind his back. Although he looked a little funny, she could not laugh. At this time, her father came over and said uncertainly, "Kai Kai, I think I've seen this person somewhere before, but I can't remember where." She slightly curled her lips when she heard that, then said to her father, "Maybe we've found our savior this time." When Father Chu heard that, he was a little confused. Chu Qingyan did not care about anything else and immediately brought her father into the Fu. The old man wanted to bathe, so Chu Qingyan ordered people to bring him to the room. But not long after, Hong Yi came to report that the old man's clothes were freshly made. He wanted the most expensive spices to bathe, and he also wanted people to help him bathe. He wanted this and that. Even the head of the inner courtyard, Hong Yi, had a headache because of him. As if she had expected this person to be so difficult, Chu Qingyan only smiled when she heard that, "Satisfy whatever he wants. If the Fu does not have it, send people to buy it. Don't let him wait too long." Hong Yi was a little confused, but still went to do as she was told. Chu Qingyan stood outside the room and watched as buckets of black water were sent out. The corners of her eyes twitched. How many days had it been since he last bathed? An hour later, the door to the room was pushed open, and a noble old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion walked out. His head of messy white hair had been tied up high, and he looked neat and tidy from head to toe. At this moment, he was stroking his smooth beard, and the corners of his mouth curled up in satisfaction. When Chu Qingyan saw him, he looked just like an old urchin. "Kai Kai, clothes make the man, and gold make the Buddha, right?" Father Chu said with a wink. Chu Qingyan nodded, and at this moment, the old man had already walked in front of her and was shouting, "Rice, rice, rice, this old man wants to eat. The moment he spoke, his noble aura was gone, and he only gave off the feeling of an old grandpa next door. Chu Qingyan laughed in spite of herself, and raised her hands to bow. This way please. Huang Yi had always been fast at preparing food. When Chu Qingyan entered the drawing room, the table was already filled with all kinds of delicacies. The old man entered the drawing room and saw the table full of dishes. His eyes flashed and he casually asked, "Did you make all these dishes?" "No, my family's maidservant made them." Chu Qingyan did not understand why he would ask this, but she still answered honestly. However, the old man's expression immediately changed. "I'm not eating, you don't have any sincerity at all." Chu Qingyan rolled her eyes at the ceiling. Could it be that he wanted to eat the food she made? Huo Ling had just returned when he heard that someone had come to the Fu to cause trouble. When he walked into the drawing room, he heard that the other party wanted the young princess to cook, and he instantly flew into a rage. When he rushed over to drag the person out, he was stopped by his young princess. She mysteriously shook her head at him, and then calmly turned around to say to the old man, "Old grandpa, my family's maidservant is very good at cooking. I guarantee that you will want a second meal after the first. My cooking isn't good, but if you really want to eat, I can make some pastries for you. Right now, you are also hungry, so don't fuss over this. Otherwise, it won't be good if you get a stomach ache. What do you think?" The old man looked at the fragrant dishes on the table and was a bit moved. Seeing that he was wavering, Chu Qingyan did not wait for him to reply and said, "Then eat something light to fill your stomach first, and then eat the fish." Hearing this faintly concerned tone, the old man looked at her with an unreadable expression. He then pretended to be impatient as he said, "Go, go, so long-winded." Chu Qingyan smiled, and then ordered Hong Yi and Xining to take care of the good man. She went down to prepare the pastries. When she returned to the drawing room with the pastries, there was only a mess of cups and plates left on the table. Chu Qingyan looked at the two large felines caressing their stomachs and her eyes couldn't help but twitch. The old man saw her come in and complained, "Good dishes go with good wine, why didn't you prepare wine for this old man?" Chu Qingyan put down the pastries and said with a serious expression, "You shouldn't drink wine on an empty stomach, it's harmful to the body." The old man rubbed his nose and snorted, "You really care too much." At this time, receiving the news that the Emperor Emeritus had entered the city, Turin immediately rushed into the Fu. He wanted to tell the young princess this great news, but when he stepped into the drawing room and saw the person sitting there, he immediately knelt down with a plop. "Emperor Emeritus is well." "Emperor Emeritus?" Everyone present was shocked at first, and then they all knelt down in a panic. Only Chu Qingyan had a smile on her lips as she slowly bent down. Chapter 152. The Emperor Emeritus stroked his beard, looking down in satisfaction at the flustered crowd below, but when he saw that small figure, he raised his brows. "Yen lass, you recognized us long ago." Upon hearing the words Yen lass, Chu Qingyan knew that she had passed his test. She immediately raised her head and replied, reporting to Imperial Grandfather, Qingyan wasn't very sure at the beginning. The moment she finished speaking, the Emperor Emeritus's hearty laughter was heard. "You're indeed the granddaughter-in-law that I chose." Chu Qingyan blushed with shame. "If it weren't for you, this old swindler, she wouldn't be living in this abyss of suffering in politics." "Imperial Grandfather, then what about His Highness?" Chu Qingyan didn't mince her words and directly asked. Anyway, since this Emperor Emeritus appeared here at this time, it proved that he had the intention to save the big ice cube. The Emperor Emeritus looked at her in dissatisfaction. "You let us eat and drink to our fill, and now you intend to use us?" Chu Qingyan coughed lightly, not wanting to admit it. When the Emperor Emeritus saw this, he waved his hand and stood up. Not going, us hasn't rested yet. It's not like that rascal hasn't suffered before. The imperial prison is nothing to him, and he won't die even if he stays in there for another day. Where is us room?" Chu Qingyan felt that this Emperor Emeritus was really willful, but he was the most senior. Moreover, she could hear that he was intimate with the big ice cube from his words. Chu Qingyan's heart relaxed, and she didn't harp on this matter anymore. She instructed people to prepare a good room and had someone bring him down. Seeing that her father wanted to follow, Chu Qingyan hurriedly pulled him back. "Father, you should also go bathe and rest. It's getting late." Father Chu rubbed his round belly, feeling that his daughter's suggestion was very good. Thus, he pulled out the large knife at his waist and placed it in his daughter's hand. "If that Emperor Emeritus wants to break the prison, give this large knife to him. I've sharpened it very well." Chu Qingyan held the large knife that had been sharpened to the point that it was hard to tell which was the blade and which was the back. She wanted to cry but had no tears as she nodded. The night passed. After Chu Qingyan finished washing up, she heard Hong Yi report that the Emperor Emeritus had entered the palace early in the morning. Chu Qingyan smiled when she heard this. It seemed that Imperial Grandfather was even more anxious than her. The Sichuan Emperor had just finished his morning court session. As soon as he walked into the imperial study, he saw a figure casually sitting in his seat. He was about to get angry, but when he saw who was sitting there, he couldn't believe it. "Father, why are you back?" The retired emperor, who had closed his eyes and pretended to be asleep, raised his head and shot him a glance. "Not coming back? Don't tell me that my grandson is being wrongly accused by you." "Father." Sichuan Emperor smiled awkwardly. Seeing him like this, the retired emperor immediately became angry. "Kneel down." Sichuan Emperor was a little embarrassed, but he still knelt down in fear of his father's majesty. As soon as he knelt down, the official documents on the table fell with a clatter. Sichuan Emperor didn't dare to resist, so he could only accept it. "You unfilial son, I gave you the country, gave you the throne, gave you power, and you tossed it around like this? Do you know how much I suffered this time? In order to rush back, I didn't eat my fill for 3 days, slept in the open, and didn't even take a bath. You unfilial son, how can you face me like this?" The retired emperor scolded as he smashed the documents. Sichuan Emperor wanted to cry but had no tears. It turned out that his father was complaining that he made his father suffer. "Father, don't smash anymore. In any case, I am the ruler of a country. Let I get up first." Hearing this, the retired emperor raised his eyebrows. "You can't stand kneeling like this? Then why didn't you think about whether Su, and granddaughter-in-law would be able to stand it when they were kneeling?" Sichuan Emperor's expression changed slightly. The retired emperor didn't want to make things difficult for him anymore, so he casually waved his hand to let him get up. "You've been idling about all day long. Instead of studying the state affairs, you only think about those useless things. Sooner or later, Su, such a well-behaved prince, will also be tormented by you. When that time comes, you'll cry." The retired emperor scolded fiercely. Sichuan Emperor didn't say a word. He wasn't as unbearable as his father made him out to be. Moreover, he didn't think that Sichuan would be affected without Su, However, he didn't dare to say these words in front of his father. After venting his anger, the retired emperor stood up and looked at Sichuan Emperor. "All right, heaven's secrets can't be revealed, so I won't say anything more. If you don't release Su, I won't acknowledge you as my son." "I understand." Sichuan Emperor could only agree. In the deep and serene prison, Xiao Su couldn't help but frown when he heard the prison door open and eunuch Chao walk in. "His Royal Highness, His Majesty invites you in." Xiao Su agreed. They left the prison and entered the imperial palace. When Xiao Su saw the person sitting on the throne, he bowed and knelt down to pay his respects. "Greetings, Imperial Father." Sichuan Emperor sized up the person on the ground. His entire body was cold. A few days in prison didn't dampen his spirit at all. Sichuan Emperor moved his lips. His forehead still hurt from being hit by his father, so he spoke insincerely. "I've wronged you these past few days. Xiao Su's eyes moved, and he replied in a low voice, "Imperial Father, you're exaggerating." Sichuan Emperor was instantly disappointed. This child never acted coquettishly or spoke softly to him. He was too different from Ranner. This son of his had never been close to him. Sichuan Emperor put away his self-blame and sat upright in his seat, regaining the imposing manner of an emperor. "The real mastermind behind the assassination of your fourth imperial brother has been found. After investigation, it's confirmed that it has nothing to do with you. You can rest assured." Xiao Su frowned slightly. What happened these past few days that made Imperial Father change his mind? That's right, he didn't believe that with that person's methods, Imperial Father would be able to find the real culprit so quickly. Therefore, this mastermind was probably just a scapegoat. "Many thanks, Imperial Father, for proving Ai's innocence," Xiao Su replied respectfully without a trace of grievance or dissatisfaction. Sichuan Emperor nodded in satisfaction, then said, "Since that's the case, Imperial Father has something for you to do." "Please speak, Imperial Father," Xiao Su replied. "Yesterday, scouts reported that they found traces of ore in the Fuli mountain range. Imperial Father wants to send you to verify it. If it's true, then Sichuan's military strength will increase by another level," Sichuan Emperor said seriously as he stroked his beard. Xiao Su's eyes suddenly darkened, and then became as deep as the night. However, he quickly cupped his hands and replied, "I will obey." "Good, but I have other things to tell you on the way," Sichuan Emperor said in a good mood. "I'll do as Imperial Father says," Xiao Su said indifferently. That day, the King of England, Xiao Su, and Sichuan Emperor spent an entire day in the imperial study, but no one knew what they talked about. When the imperial study opened, Xiao Su walked out into the sunlight. However, the warm light couldn't illuminate the desolation in his heart. "I will postpone the appointment of the crown prince. You can go in peace." He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to return from this trip. "Mine? Secret mission?" Xiao Su laughed self-deprecatingly. He increasingly felt that this palace was cold and unfamiliar. Chapter 153. Reporting to Master, His Royal Highness has been released. The man in black bowed respectfully as he reported. Standing in front of him was the sickly third prince, Xiao Ho, holding fish food in one hand and feeding the goldfish in the pond. Xiao Ho was dressed in a snow-white prince's brocade robe. It was clearly early autumn, but he was covered with a large coat, making him look even paler. If Chu Qingyan saw him, she would definitely think that he was a sickly beauty with a beauty that could captivate even the birds and beasts. Hearing his subordinate's report, Xiao Ho smiled disapprovingly. "I already guessed it after you failed to assassinate fourth brother. It's this subordinate's fault for not being able to complete the mission." The man in black knelt and blamed himself. Xiao Ho raised his hand. "You have already received your punishment, but you accidentally caused eldest brother to lose trust in Imperial Father. I'm afraid that the gap between eldest brother and fourth brother, and between Consort you and the Empress, will become bigger and bigger. I'm happy to see this happen." The man in black nodded and asked, "Then Master, His Majesty sent the eldest prince to investigate the mines in Fuli mountain range. Do we need to act?" Xiao Ho smiled faintly. "Do you really think that Fuli mountain range is a mining trip? That's just Imperial Father's scheme. Sometimes I also sympathize with eldest brother. Imperial Father was just indifferent to him. But towards eldest brother, he was pressuring him step by step. He suddenly had some expectations. What kind of changes would there be in the future?" The man in black was somewhat puzzled. Xiao Ho felt that there was no need to explain to his subordinate. Suppress all actions for now and wait for changes. "Yes." The man in black retreated. Xiao Ho lowered his head to look at the goldfish swimming freely in the pond, revealing a faint sneer. "Death is at hand and you still don't know?" He casually threw the fish food in his hand into the pond, and the school of fish swarmed over to snatch it. Xiao Ho smiled cruelly, then turned and left. Soon after, white bellies floated up from the fish pond one after another. Slaughter them all. In the house of the King of England. Chu Qingyan was restless. From time to time, she would go out to take a look and then come back, waiting anxiously. I say, Yen lass, don't keep swaying in front of this old man. This old man's eyes are about to blossom from being swayed by you. The retired emperor held a pastry in one hand and a teacup in the other. His mouth was full of pastry crumbs as he muttered. Chu Qingyan shook his head. I'm just worried. I can't sit still. The retired emperor rolled his eyes and turned to ask Father Chu, Huayuan, I can understand why your daughter is walking around, but why are you following her blindly? Mr. Chu scratched his head. I'm also worried that my family won't be able to sit still. The retired emperor spat out all the pastries in his mouth. What was that? He imagined his tall and strong grandson being turned into a green onion. That scene was so beautiful that he didn't dare to imagine it. Yen lass, this old man already told you that His Highness will be released today. Just wait patiently. If you have nothing to do, go make a few plates of pastries for this old man. The egg yolk and green tea tart from last night were pretty good. Make a few more plates. Thinking of the pastries that he had never seen last night, he couldn't help but drool. Chu Qingyan's eyes lit up, as if she had seen something. She casually replied, I'm afraid that Qingyan doesn't have time. With that, she ran forward like a wisp of smoke. The retired emperor slapped the table. This lass was too impudent. But before he could reprimand her, she had already disappeared. He couldn't help but ask Father Chu, what's wrong? Where did she run off to again? He went to pick up my family. Mr. Chu said with a grin. Then why didn't you go? The retired emperor asked in confusion. Who knew that as soon as he finished speaking, Father Chu rolled his eyes. I don't want to be a lantern. What do you mean? The retired emperor felt that sometimes, he couldn't understand what this father and daughter were talking about. Could it be that he had been away from the capital for too long and couldn't keep up with the changes? You're a third wheel. But you won't understand even if I tell you. Father Chu waved his hand and walked into the inner courtyard with his hands behind his back. I'm going to tell Dan Yang that my son-in-law is back. The retired emperor rubbed his nose, his expression gloomy. This father and daughter were too impudent. Didn't they see that he was the retired emperor? He fiercely took a bite of the pastry. He must get his grandson to uphold justice for him. On the other side, Chu Qingyan ran off and threw herself into a sturdy embrace. Smelling the faint scent of ink and the faint warmth of the embrace, the tears that she had been holding back trickled down. It wasn't until this moment that she dared to relax and believe that everything wasn't a dream. The ice cube was really back. As soon as Xiao Su entered the door, he heard a voice rushing towards him from afar. When he saw clearly who it was, he couldn't help but stop in his tracks. He opened his arms with a smile on the corners of his mouth as he welcomed the little fellow who was rushing towards him menacingly. When the person crashed into his embrace, he was slightly stunned, as if something had touched the depths of his soul. His fingers trembled slightly, and he felt as if he was holding the most precious treasure in the world. He lowered his brows, clenched his hands, and chuckled softly. The emptiness in his chest for the past few days was finally filled up. His longing was fulfilled at this moment. It turned out that he had always been longing for the person in his arms. There was no one else. Big Ice Cube, I've been very obedient at home. I didn't do anything to make you angry. Chu Qingyan said in a choked voice. You really didn't? He caressed her head, his soft voice carrying a hint of disbelief. Chu Qingyan immediately shook her head. No, waiting for you was the only thing I could do. I swear. His heart trembled slightly. The warm tears of the person buried in his chest seemed to flow into his heart, warming his heart with an irresistible heat. For the first time in so many years, he felt that returning home meant something to him. Is that so? His voice trembled. You didn't eat properly, you didn't rest properly, and you still dare to say that you didn't make this prince angry? When she ran over, he had already seen the dark circles under her eyes. When he hugged her, he could clearly feel that she had lost a lot of weight, but she also seemed to have grown a little taller. Hearing this, Chu Qingyan stuck out her tongue and wiped all her tears on his clothes without any restraint. She rolled her large eyes and said, "Isn't it all your fault? It's all your fault for making me worry." Still twisting words and forcing logic. Who was the one who said that the body is the capital of a revolution? Without capital, how can a revolution be made? Xiao Su raised his brows and mocked. When Chu Qingyan heard this, she buried her face in his chest and compromised, all right, I was wrong. Now that you're back, I'll eat properly and rest properly. I guarantee that I'll grow white and fat." Only then was Xiao Su satisfied. Reporting to master, this subordinate didn't see anything. Huo Ling, who had been watching for an unknown amount of time, covered his eyes with his hands, revealing the gaps between his fingers. "Let's go." Turin slightly turned his body, but his gaze was still on the two of them. "Let's go." Wood Spirit and Ethereal stood under the tree and said with smiles. Chapter 154. Only then did Chu Qingyan realize that she couldn't control herself, and she was like a little child in the big ice cube's embrace. Sometimes, she started to wonder if she had really gotten used to her identity as a 10-year-old. Was that why she was so shamelessly throwing herself at the big ice cube? Realizing this, Chu Qingyan blushed and jumped out of the big ice cube's embrace. She pointed at the spirits beside her and rolled her eyes. "You peeping toms. Little Princess Consort, we guarantee that we really didn't see anything," Huo Ling said with a sneaky smile. Wood Spirit, Turin, and Ethereal all chimed in. Chu Qingyan was gloomy. Xiao Su raised his hand to pat the little fellow's fuming little head and lightly reprimanded his subordinates. "All right, stop fooling around." The four spirits looked at each other. "Look, Master is starting to protect the little Princess Consort again." However, they all had a tacit understanding. Standing in a row, they changed from their previous laziness and solemnly bowed. "Welcome back to the Fu, Master." Xiao Su's brows couldn't help but soften, and the little fellow standing beside him held his hand. The coldness from the depths of the palace was slowly dispelled. "Imperial Grandfather is in the Fu. Do you want to go see him?" Chu Qingyan raised her head to ask. Xiao Su understood. If Imperial Grandfather hadn't appeared, this prison sentence would have been far in the future. His expression darkened slightly, but it wasn't noticed because it was hidden by the mask. And Chu Qingyan only felt that the big ice cube's hand seemed to have become much colder. She instantly gripped him harder, wanting to give him her own warmth. But when they returned to the hall, they only left behind a table full of pastry crumbs and empty plates. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but ask Huang Yi, who was cleaning up, "Where's Emperor Emeritus?" "He went to the side courtyard with eldest Lord Chu. He said he wanted to compete who could shoot further." Because her lord had returned, Huang Yi's tone was filled with joy. Chu Qingyan facepalmed. These two old urchins, their ages added together were almost 100 years old, yet they were still jumping around. Big Ice Cube said, "Grandpa Emperor is unruly. Let him be." Chu Qingyan immediately nodded. "I've already asked Hong Yi to arrange hot water for you. Go take a bath and wash away the bad luck. I'll hold a welcoming dinner for you tonight." Xiao Su didn't think that in just a few days, she would be able to take charge of the household. From the steward's tone towards her, as well as the servant's orderly behavior during his absence, it could be seen that her position in the household was slowly taking root. He was still slightly surprised by her growth. But on second thought, he was ultimately stronger than ordinary people. Thus, he didn't say anything else and turned around to take a shower. After he took a shower and changed into casual clothes, he saw the little fellow who was about to go out with her blanket. He frowned slightly. come here. Chu Qingyan heard his voice and turned around. Although she didn't know why the big ice cube called her, she still walked over obediently. What are you doing? He asked. I heard that in order to avoid bad luck, the clothes and blankets in the room have to be changed. I'll help you take the blankets out. Chu Qingyan didn't think there was a problem and replied. Xiao Su frowned. Put it down and let the servants take care of it. Then sit down. Thinking that the big ice cube had something to say to her, she immediately put down the blankets in her hands and sat down on the chaise lounge in front of him. She asked curiously, what's wrong? Xiao Su didn't answer. He squatted down in front of her and lifted her skirt without any explanation. She was stunned and immediately raised her hand to stop him. She said with a stupefied expression, Big ice cube, what are you doing? Although she struggled a little, her strength was as small as an ant to him. He easily lifted her skirt and revealed her two white and tender lotus-like calves. Because she had to apply medicine these few days, she had specially asked Xining to cut her trousers to her knees so that it would be easier to apply medicine. Thus, Xiao Su saw the bloody wound at a glance. Although she had already applied medicine yesterday, even the best medicine needed time to heal. Xiao Su's eyes darkened. He had been through hundreds of battles and had suffered many injuries in his life. With one look, he knew where it came from. You entered the palace? Xiao Su looked at the person above him with deep eyes. She had thought that the big ice cube was going to do something to her, but it was only because he was suspicious of her inconvenient legs. She thought that she had pretended well, but unfortunately, she still couldn't escape his eyes. However, Chu Qingyan still secretly despised her own bad thoughts. Yes, but it's fine now. It doesn't hurt anymore. Chu Qingyan replied with a smile. Looking at the person who was lying through her teeth, Xiao Su raised his hand and gently pressed it. He heard the sound of sobbing above him and stood up. Where is the medicine? Chu Qingyan grimaced in pain. The big ice cube really didn't know how to be gentle with a woman. She pursed her lips and pointed at the cabinet. Xiao Su turned around and came back with a bottle of medicine. Then, he sat down on the couch and gently lifted her legs to rest on his lap. Chu Qingyan was shocked. Was the big ice cube planning to apply the medicine for her personally? Although it was the big ice cube who applied the medicine for her before, she didn't know why she was a little bashful at this moment. She didn't know what was wrong with her. No need. I'll do it myself. Chu Qingyan said as she wanted to take the medicine bottle from the big ice cube's hand. Don't move. Xiao Su glanced at her and then lowered his head to apply the medicine for her seriously. The ice-cold medicine was applied to her sore knees, alleviating a lot of the pain. She looked at the big ice cube who was seriously applying the medicine for her and suddenly felt that it was a bit inconceivable. He should be a proud son of heaven, a war god that everyone knew, but he was willing to do something that didn't match his status. However, he was so calm as if it was a normal thing. Her heart felt like it had been lightly touched by someone. It felt a bit itchy and an indescribable throbbing. She thought of something and said to the serious person, Big ice cube, I shouldn't have lost my temper with you in the imperial prison. I apologize. Xiao Su's lips curled slightly and he looked up to tease her. Where's the stubbornness you had when you were angry with this prince? I wasn't angry. I was a bit angry at that time. Who told you to think that you had a way out for me? I wouldn't have agreed. Chu Qingyan said righteously. Xiao Su's hand paused when he heard this and a complicated emotion flashed through his eyes. Right now, she was unhappy because of his arrangements, so he had to convince her to accept the arrangements he had for her. Chu Qingyan felt that something was wrong with his absent-mindedness. She was about to ask him about it when someone knocked on the door. Xiao Su put down her clothes and said, Come in. Gu Rong entered and reported, Lord, the fourth prince has come to the residence to request an audience. Xiao Su stood up when he heard this. Bring him to the guest room. After saying this, Xiao Su turned around and reminded her, Don't run around. Be careful of your wound. Chu Qingyan nodded and forgot what she wanted to ask as she watched him leave. However, she faintly felt that there was something wrong with the big ice cube's return this time. However, she didn't know what was wrong and she was a bit confused. Chapter 155. Xiao Su entered the drawing room and saw the pale-faced Xiao Ran sitting in the chair. He couldn't help but frown and scolded, "You're seriously injured. Instead of resting in the palace, you're running around. Are you tired of living?" Xiao Ran, who had been worried that his eldest brother would be angry at him, heard the long-awaited scolding. His eyes burned and he blurted out, "Eldest brother, this subject brother didn't deliberately not come out to clear your name. This subject brother couldn't help it. I'm really sorry." Seeing him blame himself and be hurt, Xiao Su sighed in his heart, "This matter has nothing to do with you. You don't have to blame yourself. Eldest brother, as princes, do we have to be forced to kill each other for that position?" Xiao Ran suddenly had the urge to pour out his heart. During this period of time, he had been lying in bed, his heart full of confusion and fear for the future. But he didn't know who to say it to. Only now did he find an outlet to pour it out. "Eldest brother, I'm afraid that in the end, I'll become the kind of person I hate." Xiao Su reached out to pat his shoulder and said sincerely, "Guard your heart, then you can maintain your original heart." Xiao Ran's eyes reddened, but he knew that he was a man. A man didn't cry easily. So he could only endure it. This subject brother will remember eldest brother's teachings. Go back. Don't make people worry. Xiao Su said lightly. Xiao Ran nodded. Before leaving, he turned his head and said, "I snuck out of the palace. I can't stay for too long. Eldest brother, help me say sorry to Qingyan." If it wasn't for him, Qingyan wouldn't have knelt for so many hours to plead for leniency. After Xiao Ran left, a pair of black gold boots appeared at the door. Her white eyebrows were slightly raised. "Your imperial father didn't hesitate to make things difficult for you because of him. His imperial mother is always against you. It's rare for you to treat him with such sincerity. It's rare for the imperial family to have such a kind heart." Hearing the pity in his imperial grandfather's words, Xiao Su calmly replied, "Grandson is just following his own heart. I can't be considered kind. TSK, TSK, TSK. Grandpa, I didn't think that after going through so many things, you would still be so respectful and filial." The retired emperor walked into the hall, shaking his head as he spoke. His tone was somewhat incredulous, but he felt that it was reasonable. He still had some understanding of this imperial grandson of his. Isn't it all because of imperial grandfather's teachings? What's more, fourth imperial brother is also your imperial grandson. Xiao Su handed him a cup of tea and calmly retorted. The retired emperor suddenly widened his eyes. "Have you been with Yen Las for so long that you've also learned to contradict me?" Xiao Su didn't pay attention to his imperial grandfather's intermittent strangeness. He calmly said, "Qingyan is still young. There are some things that she didn't do well. Please forgive her, imperial grandfather. You haven't even married into the family, yet you're already siding with outsiders. Xiao Su, don't forget that I'm your grandfather." The retired emperor blew his beard and glared. Xiao Su smiled. "Grandson also didn't say that you weren't grandfather. Moreover, imperial grandfather, don't forget that this marriage was personally bestowed by you." The retired emperor was stunned. It was indeed bestowed by him. He suddenly felt like he had lifted a rock and smashed it on his own foot. The retired emperor stomped his feet in anger. Why did this good grandson's way of speaking change after being with Yen Las for a period of time? It didn't make sense, it didn't make sense. Xiao Su didn't pay attention to his imperial grandfather stomping his feet. He sat down and picked up the teacup in his hand. His thoughts drifted away. This trip was fraught with danger. How should he tell the little fellow to stay in the residence with peace of mind? No one responded to his monologue for a long time. The retired emperor gloomily glared at him. Then, he found a comfortable position to sit down in. His tone also recovered its seriousness and became less frivolous. "What did your imperial father call you to the imperial study to talk to you about?" Xiao Su pulled back from his contemplation and faintly said, "Traces of ore were found in the Fuli mountain range. Imperial father asked grandson to investigate." Hearing this, the retired emperor frowned. "I've been the emperor for so many years. How come I didn't know that there were ores there? It was discovered recently." Grandson also didn't know. Xiao Su frowned, hiding the faint coldness in his eyes. The retired emperor couldn't figure it out, so he shook his head and continued to ask, "It shouldn't be that simple. There should be additional tasks." Xiao Su nodded. He didn't speak bluntly and only praised, "Imperial grandfather's guess is very accurate." The retired emperor sighed softly. At this time, he had a dignified aura that came from within. His eyes were sharp and it was hard to imagine that the old urchin from before was him. How could I not understand my son? After so many years, he still hasn't changed. He's obstinate and doesn't listen to others. Forget it, forget it. One is my son and the other is my grandson. They can do whatever they want. I can't control them. I can't control them. The retired emperor had a helpless expression. Xiao Su stood up and bowed to appease him. "Imperial grandfather, your son and grandson have their own fortune. You can relax and live the life you want." The retired emperor jumped up when he heard this. His beard trembled in anger. "You dare say it like it's not you. I hope that when I return to the capital in the future, I won't have to collect your corpse. I won't play with you anymore. I'm going to find Huayuan." Humph. Xiao Su helplessly shook his head when he heard this. After a while, Huling and Turan entered the study. They immediately saw their master standing in front of the window with his back to them. "Master, are you really going to the Fuli mountain range?" Huling couldn't control his temper and took the lead to ask. Master had just stepped out of the imperial palace when the news came out. Water Spirit immediately passed the news to them when she received it. Master had just been released from prison and His Majesty had sent him to the Fuli mountain range to find that ghost mine. From an outsider's point of view, they would think that Master was the mastermind behind the assassination. However, His Majesty saw that Master was a prince and couldn't bear to offend him. He found a reason to release Master. Moreover, right now was the time when the crown prince was being discussed. If Master was far away from the capital, wouldn't he not have a chance to compete? It's hard to disobey the imperial order. Xiao Su turned around and looked at his angry subordinate as he lightly spoke. This, Huling opened his mouth. In the end, he gritted his teeth and lowered his head. Even Master couldn't disobey the imperial order. What right did they have to say anything? Turan raised his head to look at his cold master and asked in confusion, "Master, according to Water Spirit's investigation, the Fuli mountain range stretches for thousands of li and is uninhabited. People have gone to investigate before, but they didn't find any traces of ore. Therefore, this subordinate is worried that this mission will be difficult to carry out. Everything depends on effort. Moreover, this mine search is only one of the missions. There are other secret orders. Go and prepare. In 3 days, we will set out." Xiao Su frowned as he spoke. His gaze was a bit complicated. "Yes." Turan and Huling responded. However, before they left, Turan turned around and asked hesitantly, "Little Princess Consort still doesn't know about this. Should this subordinate inform her?" Xiao Su turned to look outside the window at the bright red lanterns. After being absent-minded for a moment, he slowly said to his subordinate's worried expression, "Go and do your work first. Ben Wang has other arrangements." Chapter 156. When there was no one left in the study, he walked back to his desk and sat down. He picked up a book and opened it, but he couldn't read the words. He still hadn't thought of how to tell her. He closed the book and revealed a bitter smile. Since when did he learn how to care about other people's feelings? Only Xiao Su never would have thought that there was no such thing as an impenetrable wall in this world. What should be known, would be known. It was only a matter of time. In the main courtyard, Chu Qingyan's heart was filled with joy. The big ice cube had returned safe and sound, so the large stone in her heart had finally fallen. Her parents had already returned to the Chu estate. This time, she cheerfully wanted to go to the study to find the big ice cube. However, after thinking about it, it was almost time for dinner. Perhaps he would return to the courtyard later. Thus, she slyly flew up to a large tree. The dense leaves hid her body, and below was the path to the courtyard. She didn't know if she would suddenly appear in front of the big ice cube later. Would he be startled? Just thinking about it made her excited. Although she subconsciously felt that she was becoming more and more like a child, wasn't being happy the most important thing? She comforted herself. Very soon, someone came over. She immediately held her breath. Turan had taught her how to breathe, making it hard for others to notice her presence. This was the perfect time to use it. But when Chu Qingyan saw who it was, she felt a bit of regret. So it was Turan and Mu Ling. When she was hesitating about whether she should greet them or not, the two of them seemed to be arguing, so they finally stopped under her tree. Chu Qingyan was a little curious as she listened. Turan, why did you stop me just now? Huo Ling was a little annoyed. Turan disdained arguing with him. Master already told you that the imperial order is hard and you still want to persuade Master not to go. It's better to not do this kind of useless thing. Go where? Chu Qingyan was a little confused hearing this. Turan, why do you think Master won't let the little princess know about this? Huo Ling leaned against the big tree and no longer argued with Turan. His tone was a bit discouraged, but he couldn't hide the doubt in his eyes. Turan rolled his eyes at him. It's not that Master doesn't want Xiao Wangfei to know. He's just thinking about how to tell her properly. Huo Ling nodded in agreement, that's right. Otherwise, if the little princess consort heard that Master wanted to keep her in the palace, she would probably overturn the king's palace. It's possible. Turan shook his head and laughed. The two of them smiled, but after they smiled, a kind of sadness filled their hearts. Why did His Majesty send Master away at this time? The fourth prince was still young. Was he planning to use these few years to nurture the fourth prince's power, and then wait for his master's return to contend against him? Just as the two of them were silent, a figure suddenly descended from the sky. What were you talking about? What do you mean by leaving? What do you mean by keeping me in the Fu? Chu Qingyan frowned, her face showing a calmness that did not match her age. Turan and Huo Ling looked at each other and didn't say anything. Chu Qingyan bit her lip. Do you think I won't know if you don't say it? At worst, I'll go ask His Highness. Seeing the little princess turn to leave, the two of them compromised and could only tell her everything. The more Chu Qingyan listened, the darker her face became. When she finally heard that the big ice cube had someone hide it from her and was already preparing to leave, her face completely turned black. Huo Ling rarely saw the little princess' ugly expression, so he coughed lightly to wrap things up. That's how it is. I'll go find His Highness. Chu Qingyan threw down these words after hearing this and quickly walked towards the study. Huo Ling poked the person beside him, say, do you think Master will? When he was leaning against the tree, he felt that there was someone hiding up there. Also, when he heard their conversation, he could guess who it was. So, he gave a look to Turan and the two of them continued talking. We've already done it, what's the point of worrying about it? Turan rolled his eyes at him. That's right. At worst, I'll just go to the torture room to receive my punishment. I just hope they don't hit me too hard, otherwise I'll have to ride a horse. Huo Ling smiled without caring at all. Turan also smiled when he heard this. Why did they want the little princess to know about this matter? Actually, they didn't understand it themselves. They just felt that with the little princess here, master would at least live more like them. Chu Qingyan walked towards the study. Her mood went from being angry at being hidden to feeling like she was abandoned. Hearing Turan and Huoling's meaning, the Big Ice Cube's mission this time was very difficult and the journey was long. He wouldn't be able to come back for at least 2-3 years, but the Big Ice Cube didn't want to bring her along. He wanted her to stay in the palace, otherwise he would have already told her. When she walked to the door of the study, her anger had already slowly extinguished and all that was left was sadness. Did the Big Ice Cube think she would be a burden, so he didn't want to bring her along? She raised her hands, but before she reached the door, she hesitated and stopped. Was she placing too much importance on herself? Was it because she was given a bit of benefit that she wanted a yard after being given an inch? Did she overestimate herself by coming here to question him? However, her heart felt uncomfortable. If she didn't ask for a reason, she wouldn't be satisfied. Her hands used force and the door to the study was pushed open. The sound was not small and alarmed the person inside. Xiao Su looked up and saw her. When he was about to tell her to knock before entering, he saw her pursing her lips with an angry look on her face. He knit his brows. What happened? She stood at the door, not taking a step. She was afraid that if she moved, the courage in her heart would disappear. She looked up at him and slowly said, "Big Ice Cube, why didn't you tell me that you were going to the Fuli mountain range?" "You knew?" He was a bit stunned. "Yes, I knew. If I didn't accidentally hear this news, would you still hide it from me and then secretly leave?" She became more and more excited as she spoke, so she didn't notice the pity that flashed in his eyes. This prince didn't plan to secretly leave. "When the time is right, I will naturally tell you." Xiao Su sighed softly. He didn't expect that she would still find out. This time, it wouldn't be easy to clean up the mess. With her temper, she wouldn't stop until she turned the world upside down. "Time? Do I have to wait until the moment before you leave the Fu?" She was so angry that she blurted out. It was rare for her to be so aggressive. Xiao Su frowned and looked at her sternly. "Qing Yan." Being scolded by the person in front of her, the last bit of courage in her heart gradually disappeared. Tears streamed down her face. "Big Ice Cube, do you not want me anymore?" Grief, loss, loneliness, fear. The crying little fellow in front of him seemed to remind him of himself in the past. The sky was filled with fire and the people around him fell one by one. He looked at the sky in despair. "Do you all not want me anymore?" When he came back to his senses, he was already hugging the sobbing little fellow. He looked down and saw her tightly clutching his sleeve, as if she was afraid that he would leave just like that. His heart was filled with pity. He was about to speak when he saw her raise her head and speak to him with teary eyes. "I'm sorry, I didn't want to cause trouble for you. I just don't want you to leave me alone." Chapter 157. All of her courage had lost to the inexplicable reluctance in her heart. She didn't care about anything else as she pulled on his sleeve and poured out her shameful thoughts. Time was the greatest magician. It always liked to draw a gap between people that would become bigger and bigger. In the beginning, the two of them could still look at each other, but in the end, they would be separated by the horizon. Once they parted, it would be 3 years and 5 years. If she couldn't follow him, after these years, the friendship that they had worked so hard to build would be slowly eroded by time. She didn't know why she had to follow him to the Fuli mountain range. Along the way, she had asked herself, but her heart didn't have an answer. It only told her that if she went, she would find the answer. If she didn't go, she would only regret it. So, she had to grab onto him and not let him leave her alone. She had finally found someone she was willing to rely on and be with. Whether it was her big brother, her strict father, her close friend, or someone she cared about. She had spent a lot of effort, so how could she let him leave just like that? Xiao Su looked at the little fellow in front of him emotionally. She was like a little kitten that had put away all of her claws. With teary eyes, she pitifully hooked onto him and begged him not to abandon her. He had to admit that his heart was tangled up because of her sadness. He suddenly remembered that every time before he left, the generals under his command would always have a happy and helpless expression as they complained about his family's children crying and shouting to not let him leave. At the time, he didn't think much of it. Now that he was in the same situation, he finally understood this feeling. It was pain and satisfaction. Pain, the separation that was about to happen. He was satisfied with this hard-won and precious friendship. Xiao Su faced this pair of bright and watery eyes. The words of rejection were stuck in his chest, but he couldn't open his mouth. But when he thought about the road he was about to take, he couldn't let his heart soften. Qing Yan, be good. This king will arrange a good path for you. He held onto her hand that was grabbing onto his sleeve, trying to convince her. Actually, at the same time he was convincing her, he was also convincing himself. If it was a normal day, she would have heard that there was something wrong with his words. Why did he want to arrange a path? Isn't the King of England's house the safest place? It wasn't until a long time later when she recalled the conversation that day that she finally realized that he had already seen through the schemes and had only wanted to give her a safe haven. She looked at him and slowly shook her head. Although tears blurred her eyes and she couldn't see the expression of the person in front of her, she still sobbed and said hoarsely, "Don't listen to me. If you listen to me, you won't want me anymore." Her firm tone was choked with sobs. His thin lips were pursed into a line. For the first time, he was helpless against someone. In the military camp, no one dared to disobey his orders. Those who had disagreed with him on the battlefield were no longer around. However, his military tactics were completely useless against the little guy in front of him. Neither beating nor scolding would work. A battle general of a generation, at this moment, was completely helpless against a person who had zero fighting strength. He softened his expression and tried to reason with her. You should stay in the house. When this king finishes his business, he will quickly return. Don't worry. I don't believe it, I don't believe it. They said that you won't be able to come back in 3 to 5 years. She shook her head. 3 to 5 years, you'll have grown up. How about this king come back and hold a banquet for you? He suddenly remembered that the little guy in front of him would have grown up by then. He didn't know if he could wait until then. His gaze slightly darkened. I don't want to. She shook her head. She didn't want to be separated. She didn't want to wait that long to see him again. What if you see a girl as old as me on the way back and feel pity for her and keep her by your side? When you come back, wouldn't I not even have a place to stand? She continued to spout nonsense. Xiao Su didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This little guy's imagination was too rich. He smiled, "You're already noisy enough. This king doesn't have the energy to deal with another one, so you have to believe this king. This king swears to the heavens." Chu Qingyan looked up at the sky. The moon was currently hanging high in the sky. She gave a cold snort. Don't you know that the moon is the most fickle? Every month, it's full or full. Also, do you know why vows are made up of word by word? That's because vows are discounted. You can only listen to half of it and believe half of it. Xiao Su was speechless. Why didn't he feel that this little guy usually had so many fallacious arguments? He pointed outside the door with a headache. He felt that this wasn't the time to talk about this. Calm down first. We'll talk about this tomorrow. He thought that most children were impulsive. After calming down for a night, they would probably change their minds. Chu Qingyan could guess what the ice cube was thinking when she heard this. She couldn't agree. She had to strike while the iron was hot. She had finally managed to move the ice cube, and after a night of cooling down, she wouldn't be able to move him anymore. She rolled her eyes and pretended to nod in agreement. Xiao Su was filled with doubt. Why was she so easily giving in? At this time, he saw the body in front of him tilt and fall to the side. He saw through her trick with a single glance. With a sigh, he grabbed her arm and pulled her back into his embrace. His voice was filled with helplessness and pampering that he didn't notice. "What kind of crooked idea are you thinking of now?" "Nothing, it's just that my leg is numb and my wound hurts a bit." She innocently blinked. "Then what about now?" He raised his brows as he looked at the person in his embrace. "There's no other way. My wound has worsened and I can't walk anymore." She shrugged. Xiao Su's eyes twitched. When did she learn to act so shamelessly? He had only spent 2 days in the imperial prison, not 2 years. But he quickly calmed down and curled his lips as he looked at her. "You can't carry anything with your shoulders and arms. You're so soft when you're injured. How are you going to investigate the mines with this king?" Chu Qingyan secretly cursed. She originally wanted to see if he would be soft-hearted and agree to her request, but how did he counterattack when she wasn't paying attention? She immediately struggled to get down and tidied up her sleeves. Then she looked up at him and said with sparkling eyes, I was just joking with you. My body is very good and you don't need to worry about it, so bring me along. Who knows, maybe you need to carry something heavy and I can even help you." Xiao Su looked at the thin and weak shoulders in front of him. Although she was much taller than when they first met, in his eyes, this girl was still a bit petite. Her eyes that had been washed by tears were like a mirror, reflecting the true emotions in her heart. Xiao Su saw that in her eyes, he was feeling a bit of a headache. Seeing him in a daze, Chu Qingyan couldn't help walking forward to hug him. She didn't have the angry and sad questioning from before, nor did she act shamelessly like before. She only spoke in a soft voice. "The King of England's palace is so big. Without you, without Huoling and the others, I will be lonely and scared. I just want to stay by your side. I will be very obedient and won't make a fuss. I won't cause trouble for you, all right?" Chapter 158. Her voice was soft and coquettish. Xiao Su had to admit that at that moment, his heart seemed to have been hit by something. When he was young, he was the first prince. The people around him only flattered him and were cautious. The moment he put on his mask, everyone avoided him like the plague. Now, his status had plummeted, and there were only a few people around him. No one had ever used such a determined and timid gaze to express their reluctance to part with him, holding on to him without giving up, crying and saying that they were reluctant to part with him. It had nothing to do with benefits, no purpose, just wanting to stay by his side. At this moment, the wall made of ice and snow was opened for her. "We might have to sleep in the open during this journey. There won't be any luxurious food like in the Fu." He looked at her and said slowly. He didn't miss any reaction from her. "Don't be afraid. I stayed in Mao village for so long. Didn't I go through the same thing?" Chu Qingyan replied with a smile. If this was what Big Ice Cube was worried about, then there was no need. She wasn't a pampered young miss. She didn't need to be picky about what she ate. Xiao Su continued to ask, "It might take more than 3 to 5 years. The journey will be difficult. It's not as easy as you think." Chu Qingyan looked at him. "I'm not afraid of hardship. You don't need to worry about this." These weren't problems. She was a tough woman who could fix water pipes, change light bulbs, carry gas tanks, and fix the ceiling, okay? The person in front of him didn't hesitate when she answered. It made his heart tremble slightly. Xiao Su pursed his thin lips and asked seriously, "What if it's a road of no return? Are you willing to accompany this prince?" Chu Qingyan narrowed her eyes. No wonder Huoling and Turin were so worried. It turned out that this wasn't a good task. She shook her head without hesitation. "I'm not afraid." Xiao Su sighed softly. In the end, he compromised and pulled her into his arms. "Remember what you said today. I won't forget." When he convinced her, he was also convincing himself. His reason told him that he couldn't take her with him. The journey was dangerous. He couldn't even protect himself, let alone her. But there was a voice in the depths of her heart that kept saying, "Take her away, take her away." In the end, he still couldn't let go. Perhaps it was because no one could abandon the only light in their life. She had been missing warmth for too long, which was why she cherished it so much. He had never thought that the child he wanted to raise would become his only concern in Jingdo. "You should have lived a carefree life, but in the end, I missed this hard-won warmth too much. Because of my own selfishness, I took you away. In front of you, no matter if it's a wolf, a tiger, or a leopard, or a mountain of swords or a sea of fire, this king will protect you safely and happily." Big Ice Cube, so you agreed, right? Happiness came too quickly, and she couldn't react in time. Xiao Su pinched her nose in amusement and teased, "You're so clingy that I can't get rid of you even if I wanted to." "What a headache." "Then I'm sorry, I'm afraid you'll continue to have a headache." Chu Qingyan smiled mischievously as the rock in her heart was lifted. She wasn't worried that the big ice cube would go back on his words. As the commander of an army, he couldn't go back on his words. "It's time to eat, let's go eat." Chu Qingyan held his hand and walked out of the study together. Sometimes, Xiao Su didn't understand how he let her get closer to him step by step and become an indispensable part of him. Perhaps he was too indulgent. Perhaps he had been lonely for too long, and she brought the warmth of a lively atmosphere. So be it. When they reached the hall, the main seat was already occupied. They heard him grumble in dissatisfaction, "Why are you all so slow? We're getting impatient from waiting." Xiao Su calmly sat down and said to retired emperor, "You're an elder, there's no need to wait for us." Chu Qingyan sat down and winked at the Grand Imperial Sire. "The Grand Imperial Sire dotes on us and is worried that we won't have a share after we finish all the food. Don't you agree?" Retired emperor fumed and glared as he said, "That's because we haven't had a full meal for a few days. Yen lass, don't find an opportunity to ridicule us after catching us once. Be careful that we don't spank you." Chu Qingyan stuck out her tongue. When retired emperor picked up his chopsticks, the two of them picked up their chopsticks. After retired emperor ate a piece of pork rib, he couldn't help but sigh ruefully, "How long has it been since I've had such a meal? Outside, it's all clear soup and tofu, steamed buns and pickled vegetables. We're full of pork ribs now." When Xiao Su heard that, he picked up a piece of braised pork and placed it in Imperial Grandfather's bowl. He said indifferently, "It's you who gave up a good life and insisted on traveling the world." Retired emperor looked at the meat in his bowl and was a little surprised. This grandson of his had never picked up food for him before. Today's action made him feel flattered. He couldn't help but glance at Chu Qingyan. Perhaps this lass's appearance had indeed changed his grandson a lot. It wasn't in vain that he had used his most precious treasure to exchange for an opportunity for divination. When Xiao Su finished speaking, retired emperor rolled his eyes. "What do you know? Roaming the world and riding a horse in Jianghu is truly enjoying life. Moreover, we don't want to stay in the capital and watch your imperial father do those stupid things. Although it's said that it's the father's fault for not teaching well, we've already taught him everything that needs to be taught. We don't know how that melon seed grows in that head. It's like a block of wood, not moving at all." Listening to retired emperor's nagging, Chu Qingyan bit her chopsticks and clicked her tongue. Was it appropriate for them to listen to these secrets? Thus, she asked the person beside her in a low voice, "Let's sit here and listen to these things. Are you sure His Majesty won't?" She made a throat-slitting gesture. Xiao Su glanced at her. "It'll be fine once you get used to it. Also, eat properly. What kind of scandal is biting your chopsticks?" Chu Qingyan silently lowered her head to eat. The big ice cube had turned on his strict father mode again. It was too scary. Retired emperor, who was singing a one-man show, saw that he couldn't get involved in the interaction between the two. He couldn't help but use his chopsticks to knock on the plate as he said in dissatisfaction, "What? You two lovebirds think we're an eyesore? You don't respect your elders. Be careful that we don't tell your imperial father. Xiao Su leisurely ate his meal and leisurely replied to him, I wonder who was the one talking bad about him just now. Retired Emperor choked. Also, don't knock on the plate when eating. Xiao Su added calmly. Retired Emperor was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. Chu Qingyan lowered her head and stifled a laugh. TSK, TSK, TSK. It's fine if the big ice cube doesn't say anything, but once he does, he's going to choke me. In the end, they had a delightful dinner amidst retired emperor's jesting. Retired emperor burped and said to his grandson, since you can't avoid the matter of Fuli mountain range, then go ahead and do it. Your imperial father is too stubborn. We don't want to lecture him anymore. You have to take care of yourself. Xiao Su nodded. After speaking, retired emperor pointed at Chu Qingyan. Yan lass, we have something to say to you. Chapter 159. Chu Qingyan was a little surprised. The Emperor Emeritus actually wanted to chat with her in private? It was simply too horrifying. She glanced at the large ice cube beside her and saw him nodding at her, indicating that she shouldn't be nervous. Thus, under the Emperor Emeritus's urging, she immediately followed him. When they reached a courtyard, the Emperor Emeritus stopped under a parasol tree and slowly turned around. His expression was different from his previous sloppy one, and it was slightly serious. Yan lass, do you know why this emperor called you here? Chu Qingyan was slightly stunned, then she smiled and said, Imperial grandfather, how would Qingyan know? The Emperor Emeritus stroked his beard and looked at her with shrewd eyes. Don't tell me you don't have anything to ask about this emperor's bestowment of marriage? Chu Qingyan raised her brows, feeling that the person in front of her didn't treat her like a 10-year-old child. She also withdrew her pure and innocent smile and asked with curved lips, then will you tell me? Smart people didn't need to beat around the bush when conversing with smart people. The Emperor Emeritus laughed heartily. Heaven's secrets cannot be revealed. Yan lass, this emperor can only say that you can be at ease as your little princess consort. You will know what you need to know sooner or later. Chu Qingyan pursed her lips. Wasn't that the same as not saying anything? Seeing her depressed expression, the Emperor Emeritus was extremely satisfied. The sullenness of these past few days had finally been relieved, but he wasn't a petty person who would only look for opportunities to take revenge. The Emperor Emeritus turned around with his back facing her with his hands behind his back. His tone was heavy. Yan lass, this emperor knows that you came from a different world and that you don't belong to the Chu family. This Emperor Emeritus went against heaven's laws and brought you to Tianying continent in hopes that one day, you would be able to lend my grandson a hand. Chu Qingyan instantly froze in place. What? Her coming here was all because of the Emperor Emeritus's manipulation? She opened her mouth and had many questions in her heart, but she knew that he still had something to say. She also knew that no matter what she asked, he wouldn't tell her. In the end, she could only squint her eyes and wait for his next words. Going against heaven's will and changing fate wasn't purely for Su-er, but also for Xishuan. But as for the exact reason, I cannot tell you. I only hope that you can treat Su-er well. Ever since he was born, he has never received the happiness he deserved. I watched him grow up, but I was powerless to do anything about it. Such is his fate, he is destined to face more disasters than others. I have already left the imperial family and violated the heavenly Tao, so it is no longer appropriate for me to intervene in these matters. Therefore, the future will depend on the two of you alone. Happiness or sorrow, life or death, it is all up to you, the retired emperor said earnestly. When Chu Qingyan heard these words, she was somewhat astonished and somewhat in disbelief. If he hadn't said that he came from another world, she was afraid that she would have thought that the person in front of her was a swindler. Could it be that modern atheism and scientific notions of ghosts and gods were ineffective here? Defying the heavens and changing fate? What was that? What does it mean to be happy or sad, to live or die in a single thought? Was the retired emperor here to be funny? However, she could not bring herself to smile. What does it mean to give him a helping hand? She was just a rice worm who didn't know anything. The abilities that she had were not of much use in ancient times. Moreover, she did not believe that she could help Big Ice Cube with anything. Big Ice Cube was so powerful, and he had elite family generals in his hands that outsiders envied. Why would he need her? As if seeing through her doubts, the retired emperor smiled mysteriously. The current you is so stupid. Of course, you don't have any abilities, but it's hard to guarantee that you won't have any in the future. Although those two words sounded uncomfortable, she knew that this was not the time to fuss over it. Then what should I do and what shouldn't I do? She raised her head and asked with a serious face. Just follow your heart. The retired emperor turned around and replied word by word. Chu Qingyan was dumbfounded. Wasn't that the same as not saying anything? Just as she was about to ask more questions, the person in front of her changed his serious appearance and rubbed his chin with a gluttonous look. That's right, Yen lass, the pastry you made this morning was really good. Are there any others? This solitude wants to try them. Chu Qingyan withered in the wind. You can't play like this. But she knew that the other party had already said what he wanted to say. If she continued to ask, it would be meaningless if he didn't say anything. Although today's conversation threw a heavy bomb into her life, at least she already knew the reason why she suddenly transmigrated when she woke up from her sleep in the dressing room. Facing this main culprit, she couldn't get angry. At least he had already compensated her with precious family affection. But, it was really a little mysterious. Forget it. Since she was already here, she should just go and make some pastries for this old urchin who suddenly popped out. As for the rest, she would leave it to the heavens to arrange. Seeing that she obediently went to make pastries for him, the retired emperor stroked his beard in satisfaction. Adapting to the situation, crafty and wise, the person he chose would not be bad. It's just that he couldn't predict what would happen next. But, he would wait and see. Returning to the courtyard, she saw De Bing sitting on the main seat. The faint yellow light from the fire gently draped over his body, reducing his coldness by a bit. The silver mask also lost a bit of its mystery. Dressed in a black robe, he had the leisure of a family member. Chu Qingyan was a little dazed. Most of the women in the capital were blind. What right did they have to say that her family's De Bing was horrifyingly ugly? Just this charm alone was enough to throw off those self-proclaimed elegant young masters by several streets. While she was angrily thinking, she couldn't help but walk in. Imperial grandfather finished talking to you? He put down the book in his hand and looked at her. He said some things, but I didn't really understand. Indeed, some of the retired emperor's words sounded very mysterious, making it hard for her to accept. Or, it could be said that she still didn't understand. Xiao Su laughed in spite of himself, no need to pay attention to it. He's probably bored to death and wanted to tease you. If only it was like this, then it would be good. But she faintly felt that things weren't that simple. At least, the retired emperor wouldn't summon her from the modern era for no reason. However, this old urchin's way of doing things was strange and unpredictable. Could it be that he was really bored and casually brought her over? If that was the case, then wouldn't she be too sullen? Xiao Su originally didn't care about the matter of Imperial grandfather looking for her, but seeing that her expression wasn't right, he couldn't help but slightly frown. What did Imperial grandfather say to you? She regained her senses and wanted to talk to him, but if she said something like transmigrating, De Bing would probably think that she was hot-headed and talking nonsense. So she blinked and said in a strange manner, Imperial grandfather said that I came for you. Chapter 160. When Xiao Su heard this, he laughed and shook his head. Imperial grandfather likes to make things up. If you believe it, you'll be stupid. Chu Qingyan nodded in agreement. Imperial grandfather did seem like a swindler, but her half-truth was still a bit believable. But the big ice cube clearly did not believe it. So she probed, "Big ice cube, do you believe in reincarnating souls, traveling through time and space, and changing fate?" Xiao Su raised his brows. "Are you messing around again?" Chu Qingyan shrugged, feeling a bit defeated. This kind of thing did sound a bit shocking. Seeing her little face twisted, Xiao Su thought for a moment before saying, "Maybe there are things in this world that sound unimaginable. This prince is not sure, but I won't deny it." Hearing this, Chu Qingyan was a bit moved. Actually, the big ice cube said this to prevent her from being disappointed. Why did it feel like the big ice cube was becoming more and more human? It felt really inconceivable, but it also made her endlessly happy. Could it be that the battle to melt the big ice cube from before was having an effect now? The night was dark. The stars were bright and numerous, as if they were covered in sparkling gems. Chu Qingyan looked through the window, leisurely enjoying the tranquility of this moment. She finally let go of the worries she had for the big ice cube these days. Her entire person was calm and relaxed. Xiao Su looked at her increasingly beautiful side profile and was very gratified. The little fellow was already slowly growing up. When he heard everyone's evaluation of her these days, he had a kind of illusion of glory. This was something he had never experienced even after winning a battle. It was a bit novel, but also a bit joyful. At this time, the little fellow, who had only been quiet for a moment, turned her head and asked with a smile, "When are we leaving to mine?" Mine? Only she could think of that. Xiao Su muttered, "We'll leave the day after tomorrow." Then there was still one day left. Chu Qingyan rubbed her head. She had to say goodbye to her parents and make arrangements for their following life. Time was a bit tight. Seeing the faint worry on her face, Xiao Su put down the book in his hand and beckoned to her. "Come here." Chu Qingyan, who was deep in thought, instinctively approached him. "What's wrong?" Xiao Su looked at her seriously. "If you regret it, it's not too late." Chu Qingyan was a little unconvinced. "Big ice cube, I'm not the kind of person who goes back on her words and speaks without thinking, okay? I'm not regretting it. I just can't bear to part with my parents." Xiao Su didn't know why, but he felt relieved. He raised his hand and placed it on top of her head. His tone was indifferent as he said, "Have White Tiger arrange a suitable place to clean this prince's courtyard. Have him arrange for a few servants, then bring your parents in." The moment he finished speaking, he saw her widen her eyes and look at him in disbelief. He asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" Chu Qingyan shook her head. She blinked and looked him up and down before murmuring, "Big ice cube, I find that you're getting more and more tactful. I thought that you wouldn't care about these miscellaneous matters. Is this prince that unbearable?" Xiao Su pressed her head a little harder until she grimaced. Then he released her in satisfaction and resumed his noble and unapproachable attitude. "Besides, this prince has dealt with quite a lot of the trouble you've caused. How can matters related to you be considered miscellaneous matters?" Chu Qingyan was instantly overwhelmed by the favor. She rubbed her head and said hesitantly, "Then is it okay to bring father and mother out to live? Rather than worrying about whether they've been bullied, why not bring them under your wings and protect them well? Wouldn't that be more worry-free?" Xiao Su said with raised brows. She had to admit that what the big ice cube said was very reasonable, but she was a bit uncertain. Her wings were not fully grown yet. Could she really protect her father and mother? She always wanted to bring her father and mother out of the Chu family, but the reason she did not make a move was because she knew that she was not strong enough and did not want her father and mother to suffer outside. The Chu family was worried about the big ice cube's face, so they did not dare move against her father and mother on the surface, but it was hard to guarantee that once they left the capital for the Fuli mountain range, the Chu family would not deliberately make things difficult for her father and mother. This was what she was worried about. Perhaps you don't have enough strength to protect the people you want to protect. Then before that, this king can temporarily borrow your strength. These calm words did not contain any pride or glory. It was as if he was simply stating a fact, but it filled her heart with gratitude. She already did not know what words to use to express the excitement and gratitude in her heart. The matter of your father and mother, I'll leave it to Huoling to take care of. Although he was leaving the capital, he had more than enough strength to protect these people. Chu Qingyan nodded again. Perhaps it would be a long time before she would know that everything the big ice cube did today was to set up a backup plan. He had expected the result, so he protected them ahead of time. But at that time, she did not know and enjoyed everything with a clear conscience. If she did not go with him, then she would have been one of those backup plans. But he never thought that she would be so stubborn to stay by his side. And she never thought that because she followed him without any hesitation, it would help the two of them resolve their dispute. Buddha said that for all things, if there was a cause, then there was an effect. If there was an effect, then there was a cause. It was not decided by fate, it was only decided by a person. We're leaving the day after tomorrow. Is there anyone the big ice cube wants to say goodbye to? She was going to explain the situation to her father and mother tomorrow so they would not worry. She was also going to tell them about moving. At the same time, she remembered that although the big ice cube did not interact with anyone in the capital and no one came to visit, there might be someone he wanted to say goodbye to. She couldn't help asking this out of curiosity. Say goodbye. A trace of confusion flashed through Xiaosu's eyes. Then, under the little fellow's unblinking gaze, he regained his train of thought. Yes, I'll go to the palace to see Imperial Mother tomorrow. Empress Liang. Chu Qingyan instantly dispelled the image in her mind of, the thread in the hand of a kind mother, the clothes on a wanderer, the seams closed before leaving, the fear of returning late. She would never believe that Empress Liang would treat the big ice cube like this. I'll go with you. She leaned on the table and said with a smile. The sadness in his heart was dispelled by the words of the person in front of him. Xiaosu looked at her with a gentleness that he did not notice. He said in a teasing tone, "Don't you think the palace is a scourge? Why do you suddenly have the courage to go into the deep pool? Was she as bad as the big ice cube said?" She said righteously, "How can you catch a tiger cub without entering the tiger's den? Anyway, I'll go with you." In the book of parenting, children were fickle. He deeply understood this point at this moment. Chu Qingyan saw that he did not respond, so she agreed. Every time the big ice cube entered the palace, something bad would happen. She was no longer willing to let him bear it alone. He protected her family's safety, so she did not want to see him sad. If he wanted her to stand up and accompany him, she would never back down. Chapter 161. The next morning, Chu Qingyan appeared in front of Xiaosu's door. Because he was going on a long journey, the Sichuan emperor had excused him from attending morning court. Xiaosu walked out of the room and saw the impatient little fellow. Last night, he promised to accompany her to buy things after leaving the palace. No wonder she was so impatient today. Ji Yunshu shook her head and said helplessly, "Let's go." Before she stepped out of the courtyard, Chu Qingyan almost missed her step. "Go early and come back early. Tonight, we want to eat soup dumplings, pan-fried dumplings, and bird's nest soup." Chu Qingyan looked back helplessly at the old urchin, who was waving his hands at her with all his might. She replied weakly, "Got it." Then she looked up and complained softly to the person beside her, "Imperial grandfather is a complete foodie." Xiaosu laughed in spite of himself. In the past, when Imperial grandfather was in charge of the Sichuan, he often forgot to eat and sleep. After passing the throne to Imperial father, he wandered the world. Delicious food also became a part of his life. Chu Qingyan nodded in understanding. That's why I'm saying that he doesn't want to miss out on things that he didn't seriously enjoy before. You can say that. She nodded and then smiled. Then tonight, I'll make a few more pastries that Imperial grandfather hasn't eaten before. Xiaosu looked down at her. Aren't you afraid that Imperial grandfather will blame you for this? She rubbed her head and smiled. If he wants to, then so be it. In any case, he's spending your money. Moreover, he's your grandfather. It's only right to be filial to him. I have no power and no talent, so I can only make small things to win his favor. Xiao Su's brows twitched slightly. He helped her into the carriage. You're already very good like this. In his eyes, her sincerity for him was already more important than those worldly possessions. The carriage soon arrived at the entrance of the palace. The two got off the carriage and smoothly arrived at Chaoyang Palace. Luo Yun was waiting at the entrance of the hall, as if she was not surprised to see His Highness. However, when her eyes fell on Chu Qingyan, her eyes flashed slightly, as if she did not expect to see her. Your Highness has suffered a lot during this period of time, Luo Yun said somewhat worriedly. Thank you for your concern, Aunt Luo. I wonder if Imperial Mother has gotten up. I'll have to trouble Aunt Luo to inform them. Xiao Su stood outside the hall with Chu Qingyan as he spoke to Luo Yun. Chu Qingyan shook her head in her heart. In front of outsiders, the big ice cube always had a kind of aura that kept people away. If it was like this, it was no wonder that the prince's residence was always cold and cheerless. No one came to visit. Those who wanted to get close were probably afraid of being frozen to death by the big ice cube's cold air. At this time, Luo Yun heard and showed a troubled expression. Your Highness, Her Highness the Empress has already ordered that the doors will be closed for the next few days. Please go back. Xiao Su's eyes flickered slightly, as if there was a flash of darkness in them. However, they quickly regained their clarity. Just as he was about to reply, the person beside him had already stepped forward and spoke to Luo Yun in a clear voice. Aunt Luo, His Highness will set out tomorrow. Today, I specially came to bid farewell to Her Highness the Empress. If Her Highness the Empress knows that His Highness is about to go on a long journey, she shouldn't refuse us at the door. I'll have to trouble Aunt Luo to go in and report. Chu Qingyan's face was full of smiles and her words were reasonable. Even though Luo Yun had been in the palace for so long, she couldn't find a single mistake to refute. She looked at His Highness and saw that he was also waiting for her reply. She couldn't help but grit her teeth and say, Your Highness, please wait a moment. This servant will go in and report. Seeing Luo Yun turn and enter the hall, the smile on Chu Qingyan's face slowly disappeared. Empress Liang, you really have the heart to refuse your own son at the door? Tomorrow, he's going on a long journey. Maybe it's 3 years, maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's not even in the foreseeable future. You really have the heart to refuse even one meeting? She turned her head to look at the tall figure under the sunlight. Big ice cube, your heart, has it become ice cold again? She secretly clenched her fists that were hidden in her sleeves. She did not open her mouth to disturb the big ice cube. At this moment, her gaze was fixed on the tightly shut palace door. She was both anticipating and worried that it would open again. Waiting was always the longest. Only a quarter of an hour had passed, but it made people feel like a season had passed. The doors creaked open and Luo Yun's figure appeared. Out of the corner of her eyes, she saw the big ice cube's eyebrows move slightly. Chu Qingyan sighed softly. Although the big ice cube was always cold and cheerless, as if he didn't feel anything around him, she knew that he cared. Blood was thicker than water. No one would be indifferent to their own family. Chu Qingyan stared at Luo Yun, but when she saw the expression on her face, she suddenly had a bad feeling. As expected. Your Highness, the Empress is not feeling well. It's not convenient for her to see you. Luo Yun looked at him with an awkward expression. No one saw Xiao Su's eyes suddenly darken. He nodded slightly, I'll have to trouble Aunt Luo. It's easy to get tired in the autumn. Please go to the Imperial Hospital to find a doctor to treat Imperial Mother so that she can be cured as soon as possible. Luo Yun nodded and then continued, Your Highness, Master has a few words for this servant to pass on to you. There's no harm in saying it. Xiao Su looked up at the person on the steps and responded. The Empress said that this path was chosen by you and this consort has no right to interfere. Nearly 20 years of effort have been spent on you, but it's already been wasted. You aren't willing to bear the responsibility of the Liang family, you aren't willing to fulfill Imperial Mother's wishes. You haven't accepted the so-called wishful thinking of letting you grow stronger. Then, regardless of whether you live or die, whether you are rich or poor, I hope that you will take care of yourself. This consort will no longer interfere and the Liang family will no longer help you. Luo Yun finished speaking in one breath, but her eyes didn't dare to look down the steps at His Highness who was emitting an icy aura. Chu Qingyan listened to these words angrily. What did she mean by this path was chosen by herself? Wasn't it difficult to follow imperial orders? What did she mean by all her effort being wasted? May I ask if you cared about your son before? Do you know what he likes and hates the most? What did she mean by wishful thinking of letting him grow and not accepting it? Do you know what he needs the most? He doesn't need anything. He's already strong enough. He only needs the warmth of his loved ones. If you aren't even willing to give him such a humble wish, do you still deserve to be called a mother? When he was helpless, lonely, and wandering, you cut off his path of retreat because of everything that happened before. Empress, are you really worthy of the word mother? Chu Qingyan clenched her fists, her veins popping. She wasn't willing to remain silent. Just as she was about to open her mouth to berate, her wrist was grabbed by a strong force. She turned her head to look at the person beside her in surprise. He replied without any emotion, "Please tell my Imperial Mother. I will remember Imperial Mother's teachings. Please take care of Imperial Mother's body while I am not here. I will withdraw." Chu Qingyan bit her lip and swallowed the words that were about to burst out, as well as the raging flames of anger. She forced herself to lower her head and no longer look at those three golden words. Chaoyang Palace. Why couldn't she feel the warmth of the sun and wind? She only felt an eerie chill. Big Ice Cube, how can you not make my heart ache? You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.